The Owyang Merchant Guild was known as the greatest of all the Central Plains, but it was completely consumed by flames overnight. That entire place was reduced to ashes, and the reason behind this destruction was not a common conflict with a rival merchant guild. Several guards and workers from the guild ended up lying lifeless on the floor, while gold and valuable coins were scattered amidst the overwhelming fire. All of this happened at the terrible hands of demonic cult, whose leader told the guild master that he had too strong a sense of justice for a mere merchant. The invading leader stands imposingly before him, accompanied by his masked henchmen, who show not the slightest sign of mercy in that brutal invasion. He reminds the fallen man that he is just a simple merchant, not a martial artist, as well as the grand master of that decaying merchant guild. The masked invader coldly suggests that the master simply hand over the key to the mysterious box to make things easier and save himself from worse suffering. The guild master responds with disdain, questioning if the invader truly thinks he would be an idiot to fall for such cheap talk. He even calls the wretched demonic cold idiots for not realizing that can't they simply kill him if they want to get the key anyway. The master even dares them to try and cut the box with their proud martial techniques, warning them that he cannot guarantee what will happen to the precious contents inside. Completely impatient with the man's mockery, the cult leader demands to know where the key is, using a terrifying hypnotic technique through the glow of his eyes. The guild master feels the terrible effect of the invasive technique and tries to resist with all his might against the enemy's terrible mental manipulation. He falls into despair upon realizing that his own mouth is starting to move on its own, without him being able to do anything to stop the secret from being revealed. Completely dominated by the cult's magic, the master ends up revealing that the secret key is hidden right under the guild leader's own chair. Upon hearing the forced answer, the invader gives a sign of approval for his men to start searching for the object in the indicated location immediately. It doesn't take long for one of the masked henchmen to find the golden key hidden and hold it up victoriously for everyone present to see. The guild master laments the terrifying power of the demonic cult to control bodies, but thinks to himself that it is still too early to give up on everything so easily. He tries to look calm and asks the cult leader what he is waiting for to open that mysterious box, now that he has already managed to get the key. With great caution, the masked man holds the small golden key and warns that that specific object needs to be used in a very special way. The master then provokes the invader by asking if he is going to give up so easily, or if he doesn't intend to investigate that suspicious situation a little further. The cult leader ignores the provocation and activates his terrifying hypnotic power again to coldly order the master to open the box once and for all. The guild master begins to curse mentally at the wretched leader of the martial arts alliance while holding the key with hands trembling from the hypnosis. He remembers that the leader had guaranteed that the box would be safe thanks to a special mechanism which proved totally useless against someone using sorcery. With much anger in his chest, he inserts the key into the box while wondering what kind of terrible thing that man has unloaded upon his back. Upon turning the mysterious key, the box lid finally opens to reveal a bright, intense blue light emanating from a mysterious object inside. The master is shocked to see that it is an elixir pill and wonders indignantly if the cult burned his entire guild just because of that one item. In this moment of extreme tension, a sharp, cold sword is positioned directly against the poor guild master's neck, and he has no way to escape. The cult leader holds his weapon relentlessly and warns that he is willing to hear the merchant's final words before ending his life right there. The fallen man then asks with a shred of hope how much would be necessary to pay for them to spare his life and let him leave. The invader responds coldly that the cult's followers do not covet riches, and after asking if he is finished speaking, he hears the master thank him for helping him decide. The masked villain widens his eyes and is completely surprised to realize that the merchant is about to take a desperate and unpredictable action. With a defiant smile on his face, the master states that he cannot simply die and be the only one to come out a loss after everything he lost that night. He shouts with all his his determination that he always pays his debts, whether for a favor or a deep grudge, this being his true path as a merchant. The cult leader panics completely and shouts, calling the merchant a crazy bastard upon realizing the unbelievable madness he is about to commit. The guild master swallows the glowing elixir pill at once, leaving the leader furious at such audacity for challenging the judgment of the demonic cult. Soon after, the invader's sword cruelly cuts through the air, and the poor merchant's head is mercilessly severed, while blood splatters across the floor. Suddenly, a desperate scream echoes loudly through the skies of a peaceful temple surrounded by lush green mountains, breaking the silence of that tranquil setting. The man wakes up startled and brings his hands to his own neck in a panic, desperately trying to check if his head is still attached to his body. He is completely confused to realize that he is breathing and wonders how that is possible, since he was absolutely sure his neck had been cut. At this moment of mental confusion, a harsh voice shouts to get his attention while someone holds a bamboo stick menacingly nearby. The startled young man looks to the side with wide eyes, trying to understand who the person is who is shouting at him so aggressively. A man in traditional robes shouts in anger, questioning how someone who has entered the Taoist path can be wandering around and resting in such a lazy manner. The young man is paralyzed and stares at the face of that furious man, beginning to have a glimpse of old memories that seem to have been forgotten long ago. He is shocked to recognize that striking figure and wonders if the man in front of him is truly the Taoist master Chang'an of the famous Wudang sect. The master confirms it is indeed him, and, without wasting time on explanations, lands a firm blow with the bamboo stick right on the young man's head as punishment for his laziness. Chang'an orders the boy to regain his composure and get up once and for all, leaving the young man completely lost as to what on earth is happening there. He remembers that it had been over 30 years since the time when he used to be just a secular disciple of the Grand Wudang sect in his youth. The young man remembers Chang'an very well, having been his great master before he was expelled, but he does not understand why he is there with exactly the same appearance as before. He tries to accept all that unbelievable madness of having returned to the past, but he realizes that there is something even stranger floating right before his wide eyes. A kind of mysterious panel with sacred writing and detailed prices appears floating in the air before him, leaving the young man completely confused. The young man realizes that the floating screen looks like a common bamboo scroll. The master orders him to stop stalling, but the young man realizes he is the only one who can see that magic screen. Thoughtful, he tries to read the writing carefully, thinking that scroll is the only clue to his situation. The scroll shows talents with grades and prices, making him wonder if he can buy skills with money. He analyzes the absurd prices of other legendary talents and concludes that this whole situation is completely unbelievable. One of the agile movement options is costing only 3 bronze coins because of a nice discount for beginners. Faced with that unique opportunity, the young man remains totally silent while reflecting on what he should do. He then decides to call the master to ask him a simple and quick question. With a pleading look, the boy asks with all the nerve in the world if his master could lend him 3 bronze coins. The master has a vein of anger popping out on his forehead upon hearing that absurd request from his lazy disciple. Out of patience, the master lands another accurate blow on the cheeky young man, who screams in pain from the impact of the stick. Life in the peaceful and imposing Wudang sect continues under the bright sun of that day of intense training. The young man relaxes quietly while chewing on a piece of leaf and observes the movement of others around him. A few days pass, and he finally decides to accept once and for all the reality of having returned to the past. He keeps wondering if that miraculous elixir pill swallowed was really called the Divine Demon Pill. He concludes that the item really possessed an incredible mystical power for having been able to send him 30 years into the past. The only thing he still cannot understand is the reason the leader of the martial arts alliance gave him that item. Thinking better, he realizes that the simplest solution for his future would be to just avoid receiving that pill later. Without the elixir, the demonic cult would have no reason to attack him, allowing him to live in peace, just as a merchant. With his valuable knowledge about future events, he plans to become an even greater merchant than before. A familiar voice cuts through the boy's thoughts by asking if that is really where he had been slacking off the whole time. The young man is questioned by another disciple about the reason for not being training his martial skills like the others. The smiling young man announces that today is evaluation day, while the protagonist tries to remember the companion's name. He finally remembers that the boy's name is Jianosu, the heir to a very wealthy family that owns the Bank of Wuhan. He knows that, even if they do very well on the test, secular disciples like them will hardly be promoted in level. Looking to the sides, he sees some companions doing clumsy movements that they swear are the art of Tai Chi. Jianosu is curious to see some grass flutes on the ground and is informed that they will be sold to the other students. The protagonist smiles, saying that martial arts are just an excuse for them to create valuable connections inside. He explains that the inner disciples are children, focused only on training, and would be crazy to buy toys. Jianosu is quite impressed with the quick reasoning and praises his friend's natural talent for business. The protagonist remembers that, in the future of his past life, that wealthy boy would become the Grand Master of the Bank of Wuhan. He decides that Jianosu is an excellent person to keep close. Just after the boy agrees to buy one of his flutes, the deal is closed quickly, and the protagonist charges exactly 3 bronze coins for the sale of the small grass flute. The boy says goodbye, waving, and wishes his friend good sales while he walks toward the location of the day's evaluations. Holding the shiny coins in his hand, the young man celebrates, finally having achieved the amount he needed for the purchase. He now needs to figure out how to use the magic bamboo scroll to acquire the talents displayed on the screen. Concentrated, he tries to mentalize purchase commands for the agile movement skill that cost exactly that amount. A bright confirmation message appears in the air, announcing that the purchase of the agile movement skill has been completed successfully. He looks at his own hand and closes his fist tightly, realizing that the purchase was carried out only with the power of his thought. Suddenly, a sharp scream of pain grabs the young man's attention, making him look startled at the training yard. One of the disciples who was trying to train Tai Chi is now on his knees and moaning in pain because of a terrible sprain. An arrogant little boy from the inner sect holds his arm tightly and threatens to break both his limbs right there. The immobilized disciple shouts furiously against the audacity of that petulant little boy who just attacked him from behind. The little aggressor from the inner sect accepts the challenge with mockery and prepares to land a violent blow against the young man. Thanks to his incredible new speed, the protagonist moves like lightning and manages to grab the aggressor's arm in time. The petulant little boy widens his eyes and stutters in astonishment upon realizing the absurd speed with which the young man approached. Questions if a mere secular disciple really thinks he can face him and threatens to break the hero's arm as well. The protagonist just maintains a confident smile on his face in the face of the empty threats of the arrogant inner sect boy. He asks to be excused extremely politely and sarcastically before taking his next action against the little aggressor. The young man makes a formal greeting with his hands and introduces himself with pride as the secular disciple named Muk Young. He suggests with a smile on his face that the little aggressor let go of his friend first before they start talking. The inner sect boy responds irritably that they can talk plenty after he breaks his opponent's arm. The hero confesses with total sincerity that, in truth, he does not care what will happen to that secular disciple. He takes a brief, mysterious pause, while the boy stares at him, not understanding anything of what is about to be said next. He reveals that he has an excellent product in store and asks if the aggressor would like to take a look before deciding. A soft and high-pitched sound begins to echo through the training yard, grabbing the attention of everyone present at the location. The unexpected sound causes a mysterious man with long hair to turn quickly to see what is happening. Curious about the melody, the man in blue robes begins to walk slowly in the direction where that intriguing sound is coming from. He observes the yard from the top of a hill, while the peculiar music of the grass flute continues to play steadily. The melody crosses the temple walls and echoes pleasantly throughout the peaceful structure of that legendary sect. The protagonist admits to himself, it is very difficult to play that grass flute as well as his friend Jian Ozu. He clears his throat and realizes that the children of the inner sect are left with eyes shining with enchantment for the music. A little boy named Myong Jong introduces himself shyly and asks if they could also try to play the instrument. Muk Wyung explains that as soon as the flute touches anyone's lips, it loses its market value completely. Soon after, he breaks into a big smile and warns that that flute used for the demonstration is a special exception. He says that the normal price would be 5 bronze coins, but since that one is a display model, he will give a big discount. With an animated gesture, he offers the demonstration flute for the bargain of just 3 bronze coins to the boy. The little boys suddenly have disappointed and sad faces upon hearing that they need to pay to have the toy. The protagonist is quite confused and wonders why the children's reaction was so different from what he imagined. He tries to improve the offer by offering a special discount on the purchase of a package, but one of the boys tries to explain. The little one confesses with shame that the disciples of the inner sect do not usually carry money coins around there. He cries lightly and asks if he could buy it on credit or if he could offer some other object in exchange for the toy. The young man laments mentally upon realizing that children raised only to train on the mountaintop would not have money. His true objective was never to get coins from them, but rather to create bonds with young people who one day will inherit great power. Protagonist thinks to himself that joking a little with the children about payment was already more than enough. With generosity, he announces that he will simply give away a toy for free, leaving little Myong Jiong radiant. He hands over the flute, saying it is a great honor to be able to give a gift to the young main disciples of the Wudong clan. The little boy fills with pride and praises Muk Wyung for showing so much respect for the important members of the sect. With much joy, the boy extends both hands to willingly accept that wonderful and fun gift. He knows that boy will become one of the most famous masters of Wudong in the future, known as the Invincible Sword. Making friends with someone promising is an excellent investment for the future, but a sword noise cuts through the air. A sharp blade passes incredibly close to the protagonist's face and cuts the grass flute in half on the spot. The long-haired master appears suddenly and demands to know furiously who on earth is that cheeky young man nearby. The newcomer demands to know who he is to try to bewitch the main disciples with such silly and childish tricks. By the traditional clothes the man wears, the protagonist deduces that he is part of the same generation as his old master. He realizes that the man is the instructor of those children and laments that martial artists always use force so quickly. Little Myong Jong is trembling with fear beside his stern instructor because of that aggressive reaction. Muk Wyung finds it absurd that these warriors consider any activity other than physical fighting to be vulgar. With much audacity, he questions out loud if appreciating a bit of good music has become such a grave crime there in the sect. The instructor narrows his eyes extremely threateningly upon hearing that petulant response from the secular young man. Muk Wyung maintains his firm posture in the face of authority and begins to recite an ancient proverb calmly to the man. He recites poetically that what truly wavers is not the target of the arrow, but the doubtful mind of the archer himself. He concludes the proverb by stating in a firm tone that the target always remains at exactly the same distance. The young man argues that, even if that were a trick, it should not matter to someone who knows the absolute truth. Silence takes over the yard for a few moments while the piece of cut grass remains thrown on the ground. The long-haired instructor says icily that the secular young man is extremely insolent for speaking to him like that. An aura of overwhelming blue energy begins to emanate with fury from the man's body, creating strong spiritual pressure. He questions if he can consider that that cheeky attitude of the young man a grave insult against the rules of the Wooden clan. Although he feels the enormous pressure of the energy against his body, the hero realizes the man is only trying to scare him. He knows that, regardless of their arrogance, the sect would never kill a mere disciple for such a silly reason. If that is the case, the young man decides to join his hands respectfully and prepares for whatever may come. He shouts with all his determination that, even against the strong wind, he will continue moving only forward. The instructor lets out a sarcastic smile upon seeing that the boy remains firm and hopes mentally not to end up broken. He starts to laugh loudly and praises the young man's courage for managing to speak with so much firmness, even under the pressure of his aura. The young man bows in respect while realizing that strong pressure in his stomach was the famous aura technique. The instructor agrees that the music is good and decides to buy all 15 grass flutes for the full value of the deal. The man demands the special discount for buying in bulk, but the hero warns with a smile that the promotion only applies to children. He asks mischievously if a renowned wooing master would really have the courage to want to pay the child's price. Calling the young man cheeky, the master takes out a payment note and decides to hand it to the young merchant. He hands over a valuable note for 100 coins and tells the boy to keep the generous change as an apology for the intimidation. The master asks the young man's name, who introduces himself proudly as Mokwayang while the children play happily. The young man then asks the master's Taoist name and realizes that he is really an extremely important person there. With a calm and serene look, the man reveals that his name is Chiangwa, leaving the hero thoughtful about that strong name. He is known as the Boundless Divine Sword, one of the 5 strongest warriors of Wudang and a future titan of the arts. The protagonist starts to sweat nervously upon realizing that he just haggled and provoked such a terrifying living legend. He bows, startled, and says it is an honor to meet him, thinking he never would have replied if he had known who he was. The warrior asks if he now understands who he was being insolent to, and the young man agrees, totally regretful. He thinks that, just as Wudang follows its rigid rules, a good merchant must also follow his own paths. The master gives a slight smirk and calls the protagonist a cheeky boy because of his audacious personality. Chiangwa comments amusingly that the young man does not let him have the last word and goes on his way back with the children. Mokwayang finally lets out a long sigh of relief and places his hand on his chest. They're passing through that enormous tension. Ozu reappears by surprise and says that speaking that way to a legend of martial arts was very impressive. However, the protagonist's eyes narrow upon realizing that another problematic figure is approaching them. A large, bold fellow approaches with a cynical smile, introducing himself loudly as Saigong Haiyan from another rival sect. He is known as the worst scum among the secular disciples and has a very dark history with the protagonist. The bald man falsely asks for them to get along, he being the true reason the hero had been expelled from Wudang before. Saigong Haiyan scratches his chin thoughtfully and asks if the young man's name is really Mokwayang to confirm his suspicions. The big guy says he heard rumors about a son of the Supreme King having become a disciple there and thought it might be him. With total disdain, the hero denies the rumor and states that in truth, he comes only from a very simple peasant family. The bald man mocks with contempt, questioning how someone with such humble origins will manage to survive in that cruel world. He then says falsely that there is no other option but for the two of them to become great partners from that moment on. The bald man extends his hand amicably, and the young man remembers that, in his past life, he ended up accepting that handshake. Because he had no talent or family support before, he naively thought that was the greatest opportunity of his life. But this silly illusion lasted very little time, lasting only until the terrible incident that ruined his life occurred. The Wudang master appears shouting furiously in the yard and holds a cloth bag he found in the disciples' dormitory. He throws the contents of the bag on the floor with fury, revealing several prohibited books considered vulgar by the sect. All the secular disciples begin to whisper among themselves, shocked by the presence of those prohibited books at the location. Protagonist looks from afar and recognizes immediately the adult content books that Saegong Hyeon had been collecting. He remembers with anger that the bald man had refused to lend him the books, but his satisfaction lasts very little time. The master points his finger directly at him and accuses Mok Wai-young of being the true owner of those improper publications. The bald man whistles dissemblingly while the master shouts furiously for bringing vulgar things to the sacred mountain. The master roars with all his anger and warns that he does not want to hear any lame excuses coming from the accused young man's mouth. Relentlessly, the leader orders the immediate expulsion of the young man, leaving him completely in a state of shock and panic. He closes his fist with hatred upon remembering the bald man enjoyed everything alone and then placed all the blame on his back. At that time, the hero was too weak to try revenge, but now things and times are totally different. With an extremely intimidating and challenging look, the protagonist refuses to accept that traitor's handshake. He questions ironically if the bald man feels like a true king there, just because he learned a little bit of martial art. He says it is disgusting to see the bald man pretending to be strong and asks if being the son of a fifth-rate sect leader is a big deal. With all the audacity in the world, the hero points his index finger at the adversary's face and tells him to grow up once and for all. The bald man is paralyzed and the protagonist takes a firm step forward, demonstrating that he does not fear any physical combat. Saegong Hyeon says irritably that he thought the young man was good only with words, calling him a madman without love for life. Mok Wai-young just smiles with mockery and asks provocatively if the big guy really intends to hit him there. He even suggests with irony that the two of them resolve that in a fist fight once and for all, so they can be expelled from the sect together. The bald adversary is completely mute in the face of that bold and unexpected proposal from his old target of bullying. With a look loaded with pure anger, he turns his back on the hero while warning him seriously to be very careful. The protagonist watches the rival's departure with arms crossed, lamenting the coward gave up on fighting right there. He reflects that he needs to leave that temple soon to be able to use his memories of the future in the best possible way. He concludes that his great chance to change his destiny will be during today's important evaluation of the secular disciples. Suddenly, a familiar voice shouts very loudly for his true name in the middle of the yard, breaking his thoughts. His best friend runs to him very worried, asking what he will do if he ends up facing the bald man in the evaluation. He responds calmly that the fights are random, but the friend thinks he is being too optimistic about the situation. The hero knows it is not just optimism, for he remembers perfectly that his adversary will be one of Saegong Hyeon's henchmen. The other time, he ended up suffering a crushing defeat to the henchman for having no martial talent or strength. He smiles with disdain upon remembering that things would only repeat themselves if nothing unexpected happened on that day of tests. Night finally falls over the great main temple, and the torches are lit to illuminate the beginning of the annual evaluation. The first hand-to-hand fights begin with many punches and basic defense techniques between the disciples. Sitting in his chair, Master Chunyan watches the fights with a bored and unimpressed expression on his face. The legendary Cheonhwa approaches the master's table slowly upon noticing that the combat evaluation is already happening. Chunyan is surprised by the visit and asks what brought his sect brother to that simple training yard. The master warns with disdain that there is really no secular disciple they're worth receiving his attention. Cheonhwa asks if the fights are in fact random, and the master confesses that he has been altering the table secretly. The legendary warrior with long hair reacts, surprised upon hearing that blatant revelation of combat manipulation. Meanwhile, the protagonist waits patiently in the bleachers, chewing a leaf beside his companion Jian Ozu. With arms crossed, Chianghua observes the audience from afar while thinking of a way to intervene in the progress of the tests. He then asks for permission to personally alter the next combat on the list, and the master agrees without questioning anything. The master lets him act as he pleases, and the announcer shouts very loudly to reveal the next combat of that intense night. The announcer calls in a solemn tone the name Mukwaiyang, so that he heads immediately to the center of the arena. The protagonist warns his friend calmly that he will be right back and descends the bleacher steps with very slow steps. Silence takes over the arena while all the disciples wait with great expectation for the announcement of the next rival. The announcer shouts the name Sagong Hyan, and the bald big guy takes a step forward with a look thirsty for blood. The hero looks back completely perplexed and startled upon realizing that he will face his great rival suddenly. He looks at the judges' table and realizes immediately that Master Chianghua was the one who altered the combat table. The Master of Ceremonies demands that both prepare themselves and shouts, authorizing the official beginning of that dangerous dispute. A wicked smile appears on the bald man's face, who celebrates because his chance for revenge has arrived well before expected. The big guy roars, calling the protagonist a cheeky bastard, and advances at high speed with all his brutal fury. He lands a violent downward punch while shouting that the hero should have paid more attention to the warnings. Mukwaiyang dodges by a hair the devastating impact, thinking tensely that that was not part of his plans. He then prepares something in his hand and concludes that his goal of teaching that proud bald man a good lesson remains the same. He throws a huge amount of dust directly at the face of the adversary who approaches without protection. The protagonist takes advantage of the gap with a big malicious smile, seeing that his dirty trick worked perfectly. Completely blinded by the dust in his eyes, the bald man lets out a desperate scream of agony and begins to punch the air for nothing. The young man approaches quickly with his fist closed and prepares to land an unrelenting sequence of attacks. He connects a strong and accurate punch right on the rival's chin, using the prohibited techniques he learned on the streets. Without giving the adversary time to react, he lands another crushing punch directly against the big guy's abdomen. He is amazed to notice that his own body is feeling incredibly lighter and faster than usual. With terrifying speed, he lands one more powerful punch that hits the ribs of his adversary squarely. The overwhelming impact causes the bald man's enormous body to be thrown backward and fall with great force on the ground. The hero falls on his back on the ground as well, thinking worriedly that he ended up getting too excited and landing extra punches. Sagong Hyan gets up spitting blood, and with a terrifying murderous fury stamped on his face reddened with anger. The big guy roars that he will kill him right there, causing the protagonist to think quickly about what he must do to beat him. Master Chung Ian is furious upon seeing the young man use dirty tricks that not even the orthodox faction would accept. Suddenly, someone places a hand firmly on his shoulder to restrain him. Chung Yin is startled upon realizing that the one who held his shoulder was Master Chianghua himself. The legendary warrior just asks calmly for them to watch the dispute for a little longer. He realizes that the young man has a plan in mind while seeing Weiyang prepare to fight. Sagong Hyan roars with hatred and advances with an extremely violent kick in the direction of the opponent. The attack destroys the arena floor with force, but Weiyang manages to dodge with agility. The bald man continues advancing aggressively, while the hero repositions himself quickly. Sagong Hyan lands another powerful punch, but the young man manages to duck and dodge the blow. The protagonist slides his foot on the ground and takes advantage of the gap to prepare his counterattack. He connects an accurate punch to the big guy's chin, leaving everyone around surprised. Weiyang looks at his own fist upon feeling that the technique flowed totally naturally. The big rival retreats while moaning in pain from the strong impact he just received. The young man realizes that the only difference from his past life was having bought the agility technique. Sagong Hyan shouts in anger and attacks again desperately and uncontrollably. The protagonist dodges the blow without effort and is impressed with his sudden change. He lands one more brutal punch right on the arrogant bald man's face, who cannot defend himself. The big guy collapses, knocked out on the arena floor, with a thread of saliva dripping from his mouth. Wayang breaks into a big smile upon realizing how broken his newly acquired skill is. He decides he needs to leave there soon to earn a lot of money with his valuable knowledge, but his celebration is interrupted upon hearing the rival's voice getting up with much anger. Sadong Hyeon wipes the blood from his mouth and swears with hatred that he will end the young man's life right there. Wayang realizes that the opponent's aura has changed and fears he will use his powerful internal energy. The bald man takes a deep breath while channeling all his spiritual strength for physical combat. He attacks with terrifying speed, leaving the hero surprised at the increase in power. The young man tries to retreat from the brutal onslaughts, but realizes he is running out of space in the arena. He dodges the violent blows with difficulty and begins to doubt his own victory. The bald man continues landing an insane sequence of punches with all his internal energy. The young man feels cornered by not having internal energy and by knowing only the basics of combat. Suddenly, Master Manhwa appears in the middle of the arena and blocks the attack with extreme ease. He positions himself with his sword sheathed and stares at the big guy with a very stern look. The legendary master gives a scolding to the aggressor for using internal energy against a mere beginner. Sagong Hyeon tries to justify himself, complaining that the protagonist used sand to blind him first. Cheonwa agrees with the accusation and turns to face the young man, who is quite surprised. The master complains that a Wudang disciple should never use dirty tricks of a street bully. He orders the young man to wait there to receive his due punishment according to the sex rules. The legendary master then announces out loud the end of the secular disciple's evaluation. Wayang celebrates in silence for having successfully achieved all his objectives of the night. He managed to hit the rival and even found an excellent excuse to be expelled from the temple. The young man observes the temple under the moonlight and already begins to plan his future business out there. Cheonwa remains thoughtful while observing the calm of the night after the end of the disputes. Chung Ayan approaches his sexed brother and asks if he is okay after the confusion. The annoyed master insists that they must immediately expel the cheater Wayang. Cheonwa closes his eyes in silence to reflect on everything he witnessed in that combat. He questions his brother if he did not notice the perfect movements the young man performed in the arena. He remembers that the young man only learned the basics, and even so demonstrated spectacular agility. The master insists that the precision of those quick dodges was something truly impressive. He concludes by asking if that does not prove that the boy possesses an overwhelming martial talent. The other master agrees with the talent, but remembers that the rigid laws of Wudang must be followed. Chung Ayan awaits the final answer of his sect brother, while staring at him seriously. Cheonwa thinks with a slight smile about what punishment he should give the young lad. Master Chung Ayan announces that young Wayang will serve temporarily at the Gokjin Pavilion. He says the decision was made by Master Cheonwa and that the young man should be very grateful. Chung Yan walks away, complaining in a low voice about why they did not expel the boy. The protagonist is very surprised and confused for not having been sent away from the temple for good. He scratches his head, remembering that in his past life he was expelled for much less than he did today. This unexpected decision by the leaders ends up totally ruining his initial escape plan. His best friend approaches trying to comfort him and says that at least he was not sent away. Jian Osu praises his friend's strength and suggests he try to become one of the inner disciples. The hero just makes a face of disdain, knowing he has no true martial talent. He remembers sadly his past life, where he failed miserably in all physical arts. He knows very well that his victory earlier was thanks to the mysterious talent shop of the scroll. Without wanting to think much about the matter, the young man decides just to take a deep breath and move forward. He says goodbye to his companion and warns that he is already heading toward his new workplace. The protagonist laments while walking, realizing that his quick expulsion has become a lost cause. He plans to steal some coins, since that location is responsible for handling the sect's finances. However, the young man ends up having a big surprise as soon as he passes through the pavilion gates. Master Chiang-awa awaits him with a beautiful smile on his face, leaving the young man completely without a reaction. The boy asks, quite surprised, if the legendary warrior is actually one of the elders of that place. Chiang-wei explains his presence there and warns that the young man's task will be to act as a messenger. Wai-young repeats the word, startled by imagining the tiring work he will have ahead. The master explains that he will have to take financial documents to the other pavilions on the mountain. He tries to reassure the young man by saying not to worry too much about it just being extra work. The man decides to teach all the complex geography of Mount Wudang and tells the boy to follow him. Chiang-wei begins to walk while the young man accompanies him with his head down and total discouragement. The young man deeply laments his terrible luck upon realizing the absurd amount of tasks. The dark night finally falls and covers the entire peaceful and gigantic sect with its dark mantle. The hero packs his things in the room while remembering the dangerous trails and the steep climbs. He opens the door carefully because he does not want to lose his precious second life falling from a cliff. He walks with slow and silent steps after making his final decision about that situation. The young man takes advantage of the night's silence to start his discreet escape around the temple. Wai-young runs in a hurry because he believes an escape in the middle of the early morning is his only real way out. The moonlight shines intensely in the clear sky and illuminates the ancient and deserted buildings of the great sect. He makes a brief pause on the way to observe around and try not to attract anyone's attention, but he is quite startled to notice how the mountain trail is scary and dark at night. He laments not being able to buy the night vision skill because his magic shop does not accept notes. Without better alternatives to guide himself in the darkness, he decides that the only option is to light a fire. He raises the lit torch with determination, ready to force his descent down the mountain once and for all. Knowing the light might reveal his position, he prefers to run that risk than plummet into the abyss. The hero maintains a mischievous smile while thinking that Mount Wudang is too big for him to be caught. To his surprise, some mysterious silhouettes emerge suddenly right in the middle of his path. He realizes instantly that his plan failed and that he has just been discovered by the guards. Upon being interrogated, the protagonist lies quickly and says he is just a humble herb gatherer. He invents that he ended up falling asleep during work and that when he woke up it was already late at night. The guard finds that story quite suspicious, but the boy tries to prove it by showing what he gathered. He opens his hands hastily to display the green leaves he tore from the ground on his ascent. The guards look at the leaves without understanding anything, since they also know nothing about plants. The hero celebrates in silence upon realizing that the guards fell for his silly lie about such herbs. The guard returns the torch amicably and wishes him a good and careful descent back home. The protagonist runs down the stairs very happy for having managed to deceive the patrol with his trick. The hero runs toward the temple gates, believing his freedom is just a few steps away. He lets out a confident smile for thinking that finally nothing else will be able to prevent his successful escape. Suddenly, his body freezes completely upon hearing a familiar voice calling his name in the middle of the darkness. The mysterious voice asks where he is going in such a hurry, leaving the young man shivering with dread. The young man prays silently with the hope that it is not the person he feared so much meeting at that location. Master Chiang-wei emerges from the shadows asking if he really thought no one would notice his escape attempt. Wai-young is in absolute shock upon coming face to face with the legendary long-haired warrior blocking the path. Sweating from pure nervousness, the protagonist asks the master how he managed to discover his secret escape plan. Chiang-wei gives a slight smile and asks if the young man really underestimated the perception of a true martial artist. He explains calmly that the facial expressions and muscles of a person never lie about their real intentions. Realizing he can no longer escape that situation, the hero asks what the master intends to do with him now. The The warrior warns that, before taking a definitive action, he wishes to ask a very important question. He wants to know the real reason the boy wants to abandon a place that so many people in the world dream of entering. The protagonist explains that he knows his limitations and that he would never be able to pass the official disciple test. He confesses discouraged that he simply does not possess the talent necessary to pass the difficult sect tests. The master counters calmly, saying that the young man is giving up without even having tried for real before. The boy says he is a lost cause, but the warrior warns he can see through all his lies. Manhwa promises to keep a secret and states that the young man actually possesses a brilliant martial talent. The boy is tense, since he could never confess that his talent comes from a magic scroll shop. Without another alternative to get out of that situation, the young man decides that the best thing to do is speak with sincerity. He assumes an arrogant posture and shouts that the Wudang sect is too small a container for his great being. The great master is left completely mute and static in the face of that so bold and presumptuous response from the young man. The hero starts to sweat coldly and wonders mentally if he ended up crossing the lines with that silly declaration. He asks shyly if the master is okay, but the man just lets out a quite intriguing and mysterious laugh. Manhwa breaks into an amicable smile and says he understood perfectly the meaning of the young man's arrogant words. The young man is excited and asks with hope if that means he is finally free to go away. To his disappointment, the master's countenance changes quickly, and he responds with a quite cold shake of his head. The warrior says that, as a member of Wudang, he cannot simply ignore a cheeky declaration like that. He draws his sword and warns in an imposing tone that he will show the young man the true and magnificent essence of the sect. A brilliant and overwhelming bluish energy begins to emanate from the blade of his legendary weapon, cutting through the air. The hero protects himself with his arms upon feeling an enormous spiritual wind pressure arise suddenly in the arena. He realizes in shock that that strong wind is of the physical manifestation of the master's internal energy. Manhwa moves with extreme elegance, leaving beautiful luminous tracks of blue energy through the temple yard. A gigantic young symbol appears drawn on the arena floor through the warrior's perfect movement. He looks fixedly at the boy and orders him to observe with much attention every detail of his martial demonstration. The master's steps are incredibly soft and precise, reminding one of the calmness of a stream that glides without haste. He executes a quick and perfect sequence of blows, moving with a dexterity that seems almost supernatural. Protagonist watches that wonderful scene with eyes shining with admiration for the extreme beauty of the technique. He notes that the technique is as soft the course of a calm river, conveying a feeling of pure peace and fluidity. At the same time, it carries the overwhelming impact of a storm capable of destroying any obstacle, and the movements continue ceaselessly, resembling the infinite flow of the depths of the ocean. The warrior finishes his display, revealing that that is the true and ancient secret of the essence of Wudang. He positions himself imposingly and names that sacred technique of his as the legendary Taiji Wisdom Sword. The immense circle of blue energy that was drawn on the floor begins to dissipate slowly through the cold night air. Wayang remains totally paralyzed and speechless after witnessing such a grandiose demonstration of power. The master sheathes his weapon and asks with a smile if the boy finally managed to understand the message. The young man comes out of his trance and confesses sincerely that there is only one single doubt hammering in his head now. He asks what exactly a mere secular disciple like him should do with that display of power. Manhwa sheathes his sword and reminds the boy that he questioned the capacity and size of Wudang. The master extends his hand and explains that he only wanted to show the young man the true depth of the sect. Master Manhwa raises his hand enveloped in a mysterious aura before the young hero. He states with pride that there is no type of genius that the Wudang sect cannot contain. The protagonist makes a face and wonders why the minds of martial artists only think about fights. Realizing that the dialogue will not work, he resolves to change the strategy to try to convince him. The lad apologizes for his previous speech, but immediately adds a "however" into the conversation. He shouts with all his strength that even so he refuses terminally to remain in that temple. The warrior with long hair just stares at him with serenity and asks the reason for so much resistance. Young counters with shouts, saying it is just because he wants to, asking what the master will do about it. He argues that, if the person involved herself does not want to stay, no one should force her to anything. Manhwa says that the young man is extremely naive for not having the slightest notion of his own genius talent. The man compares the boy's escape to watching a child jump into a well without doing anything to stop it. The protagonist hears the advice in silence, while trying to process the gravity of those words. The master concludes by saying directly that he is forbidden from leaving the mountain without his permission. He remembers that, as the boy's parents wanted him to study there, they will be happy with the news. Young enters despair and shouts, asking why the man wants so much to keep him trapped in that place. He yells that he is just the son of a humble peasant, and that it makes no sense to receive so much attention. The boy questions why such a legendary and rich sect would waste time with someone insignificant like him. He rails indignantly, wanting to understand once and for all the real reason behind all of that. An expression of extreme amusement and mystery arises subtly on the face of the legendary wooing master. With a simple gesture, the warrior responds, smiling, that he is doing all that just because he wants to. The following day, the first lights of the sun illuminate the silent yard of the great financial pavilion. The young man receives an official identification badge showing he has become a temporary disciple of the sect. Manhwa explains calmly that it would be very difficult to supervise the boy if he remained at the low level. He reveals that the sect leader did not trust the lad, and for that reason only allowed the temporary promotion. The warrior encourages the boy by saying he will be able to become an official member if he shows plenty of effort. While listening to the master speak, the protagonist thinks that he still needs to escape there to get money. He considers whether he should reveal the truth about his magic shop that demands coins to make him strong. He sighs upon thinking that it would be much easier to buy the scroll's talents if he had some money. Suddenly, the hero widens his eyes upon having a brilliant and timely idea to solve his problem. He grabs the master's attention with a sudden excitement that leaves the warrior quite intrigued. Without any shame, the young man asks directly to the man if by any chance he has any coins saved up. The warrior has a drop of sweat on his forehead for being the first time in his life someone asks him for money. The lad explains quickly that he only wishes to exchange the financial voucher he received for real coins. Manhwa warns that coins are useless on the mountain, but the boy insists by saying he just loves money. The master agrees to the exchange and takes the voucher from the boy's hands to provide the requested amount. He remembers that the boy was sent to serve his punishment precisely in the finance pavilion. The man then removes a heavy cord full of shiny bronze coins to hand to the lad, but to the boy's bad luck, the master warns that he will keep the money until the punishment service ends. The protagonist enters total despair and shouts, stating that that money belongs to him by right. The master counters by saying he will just keep the amount safe and that he is not stealing anything from anyone. The boy complains about the injustice and demands his coins back immediately, refusing any deal. Manhwa begins to keep the coins in his robes while giving a slight provocative smile to the lad. He confesses in a mocking tone that he knows very well the boy would use the money to try to escape again. The master begins to walk away while repeating that he will hand over the coins as soon as the work is concluded. Suddenly, a harsh voice emerges from the back of the pavilion asking the reason for so much shouting around there. A man with a sleepy face appears, complaining about the loud noise that was hindering his rest. Manhwa greets the newcomer with much respect and calls him by the name of Master Chiangsu. The newcomer complains about his position there, remembering that that pavilion was the place they demoted him to. He analyzes the lad's physique and doubts his skills, although he admits the boy seems to have talent. Chiawa smiles satisfied and warns that he will leave the young man under the care and responsibility of his brother. Master Chiangsu lets out a long and tired sigh as soon as he sees his sect brother leave the location. The protagonist is thoughtful and wonders if those two men are plotting some plan against him. He tries to cook up a quick strategy so as not to end up falling into any trap of those masters. The lad concludes that at the moment he has no other choice but to cooperate and follow the man's orders. Chiangsu warns with disdain that the boy's workday will begin at 5 in the morning and will go until 7 at night. He orders the young man to deliver some special bamboo tubes directly to the Semcheong pavilion. The boy discovers with horror that this pavilion is located right on the highest and steepest peak of the mountain. He complains a lot, remembering that he did not even learn the basic techniques of fast movement to climb there. But his indignation increases even more when he is presented with the true size of his task. Wai-young is completely horrified upon seeing a gigantic bag full of bamboo tubes that he will have to carry. He throws himself on the ground, crying from drama, stating that for sure he will fall from the cliff and die on the way. Without patience for drama, the master threatens to expel the young man from the sect for negligence in case he refuses to work. The man reminds the lad that, despite being a temporary member, he is still considered an official disciple. He alerts with a cold look that the expulsion of an official disciple requires the complete destruction of his danshin. The hero knows that the loss of his energy center would make him spend the rest of his days as an invalid. The man walks away and wishes him good luck, telling the lad to report to his room as soon as he finishes all the service. Protagonist clenches his fists with hatred upon realizing that Chiawa promoted him only to be able to punish him in that way. Resigned to his terrible destiny, he begins to put the heavy bamboo tubes inside his bag. The young man puts the immense burden on his back and begins to climb the mountain while grumbling about his bad luck. With much effort and tiredness, he supports his hands on the rough stones to manage to scale the steep cliff. He scales the rock with difficulty while cursing mentally every member of the Wudang sect as stark raving mad. The sun begins to set on the horizon, painting the mountain sky with beautiful golden colors at the end of that afternoon. A trembling and exhausted hand finally manages to reach the top of the stone hill after a long time of climbing. The hero lets out a moan of pure pain and tiredness upon managing to pull his worn-out body to the flat surface. He collapses on his back on the packed earth ground, panting and feeling that his body is about to fall apart. He observes the beautiful view from the top and thinks that the wonderful landscape at least compensated a little for the suffering. A resident of the place approaches and asks if the lad is the new delivery man in charge of bringing the orders. The man complains about the lad's delay, while the protagonist remains lying on the ground without strength to answer. The delivery man warns that he will not be able to return to his lodging until all deliveries are done. The hero closes his eyes and tries to maintain composure so as not to explode with anger at that disheartening news. He sits on the edge of the high cliff and curses every one of those cursed warriors of the Wudang sect at once. The next morning, Master Chiangsu walks back to the pavilion after a peaceful night of rest. He is surprised to find his brother Chiangwa standing near the entrance in the very first hours of the day. The long-haired master asks with a tone of curiosity if the young hero managed to survive the task. The other master stares at him seriously and questions if he really has the courage to ask a question like that. Chiangwa laughs lightly, making the brother comment that he possesses a quite distorted and wicked sense of humor. He remembers that Sancheong Cliff guards the secret of the most famous fast movement technique of the sect. He explains that climbing that rock without mastering the basic principles of balance is an impossible task. Any common disciple would end up slipping their foot easily on the smooth stones and falling from a great height. The master concludes that the location is so scary that trying to climb, even a single time, is a true suffering. He adds that it was a tremendous cruelty to make the lad climb that dangerous rock in the middle of the dark night. He thinks that climbing without the light of the moonlight would be impossible and asks if the objective was to break the young man's spirit. Chiamwa just turns his face with serenity, states that this type of concern makes no sense there. The master prepares to go after the remaining deliveries and asks how many orders still remain to be finished. The warrior with long hair maintains his serene look and makes a sign for the brother to see with his own eyes. Cheong-su looks in the direction of the room and immediately feels that something extremely bizarre happened in there. With a mysterious smile, the master reveals that in truth there is nothing strange about that whole situation. He shows that the young lad actually managed to deliver absolutely all the orders on that list. The boy sleeps deeply, and the master reveals, shocked, that he did the whole impossible service in a single night. He concludes impressed that the young man must have climbed and descended that dangerous cliff at least 3 times. The master is quite surprised to see that the young man learned a legendary technique on the very first day of the climb. Meanwhile, the bamboo tube swings dangerously on the young man's back as he tries to keep his balance on the rock. With great determination in his heart, he holds one of the green bamboo tubes firmly to prevent it from falling into the abyss. With no other viable option to carry everything, the young man decides to bite down on the bamboo hard as he continues his climb. The master watches the young man climb with agility and thinks that he truly seems to be an incomparable divine talent. He laments that the boy didn't join the sect 10 years earlier to become a pillar of the martial world. Suddenly, the master's thoughts are interrupted by the unexpected arrival of his respected sect brother. The two silently watch the young man sleeping, exhausted on the ground, covered only by a warm fur blanket. The master looks at the boy with a mischievous smile and decides that they should test his limits even further today. Wai-young finally starts to wake up with a tired expression and a bit of drool running down his face. The young man stretches on the ground and thinks with relief that he truly thought he would perish from the previous day's effort. He realizes he is covered by a comfortable fur blanket and mentally thanks his item shop. The finance master glares at him with disdain and asks if he is already tired from doing such a simple task. Without showing any patience, the man shouts, ordering the young man to get up once and for all to return to work. Wai-young tries to return the blanket, but the master complains, saying he doesn't want an object dirty with drool. Although the master is rude, the protagonist decides he will keep the comfortable fur blanket anyway. The young man packs his things in a hurry, while the master watches his back with a very stern look. The man tells the boy to pick up the new documents in the room next door and orders him to follow immediately. He warns in a mysterious tone that the two need to go together to a very important location in the Wudang sect. The two walk side by side along the dirt paths under the clear light of a beautiful new day starting on the mountain. Wai-young follows his superior in silence while carrying a bag full of new papers on his back. Noticing the path, he realizes they are heading to the highest peak again and fears he will have to make more deliveries. Suddenly, the master throws a blue cloth blindfold directly into the boy's face, who is startled by the action. Holding the fabric in his hands, the young man is confused and asks why he is receiving that piece of cloth. The man coldly orders him to cover his eyes completely with the cloth to begin today's new task. With a sarcastic smile on his face, the master points to the cliff and orders the young man to climb that rock again. Outraged by that absurd order, the hero throws the blue cloth on the ground, very angry with his supervisor. He yells in protest, asking if the master really thinks he can climb a cliff blindfolded. The young man refuses to follow such a dangerous order and makes it very clear that he does not intend to take that risk. The master merely threatens to destroy the boy's energy center, causing him to put the blindfold on very quickly. Now completely blindfolded, the protagonist stands before the gigantic and frightening stone cliff. He touches the rough stone wall and begins to despair, not knowing what to do to climb without seeing anything. Wai-young thinks irritably that this absurd task is actually just a plan by the master to see him fall and meet his end. With great fear in his heart, he plants his left foot on the wet rock and begins to climb with extreme care. He knows that his purchased agility helps a lot, but one single false step could be his definitive end. The master watches everything from below, while the young man tries to reach for the next hold, feeling like he is about to fall. Holding tightly to the stones, the hero tries to focus all his attention so as not to make any fatal mistakes. He takes a deep breath with his eyes closed under the blue blindfold and tries to feel the relief of the mountain with his fingertips. Suddenly, a very strange sensation arises in his mind, and the young man realizes he is managing to see the path. Several bright points of blue energy begin to appear on the rock, revealing the perfect path for the climb. The hero tilts his head, confused, as he tries to understand how that is possible while being completely blindfolded. He extends his right hand and grips exactly one of the bright points, feeling a strong connection with the stone. The young man realizes that this mountain seems to be guiding his movements magically and naturally to the top. He notices that he is not choosing the path, but rather being led by an invisible force pulling him upward. Each step and hold he finds on the rough rock glows intensely blue, making the entire climb easier. A perfect trail drawn with points of bluish light guides the young man through the dangers of that steep cliff. Wai-young finally reaches the top of the mountain and leans on the firm dirt ground, feeling a huge sense of relief in his chest. He removes the blue blindfold from his eyes and notices that a warm energy has begun to flow in perfect rhythm through his body. The young man stands at the top of the mountain, feeling that he has just mastered a high-level movement technique. Upon placing his hand on his stomach, he is shocked to realize that his internal energy center is very warm. He realizes that his current level is totally different from his past life, where his internal energy wouldn't even move. Suddenly, the young man is hit hard on the head with a book thrown by the master for having removed the blindfold. The young man complains loudly about the aggression while holding the mysterious book that was thrown at him. He looks closely at the object in his hands and realizes it is the Wudang sect training manual. The master explains seriously that the book contains the secret to the technique he just performed on the rock. He warns that the young man only learned the physical part and now needs to read the manual to understand all the theory. Wai-young holds the manual with curiosity, feeling an indescribable sensation as he progresses so quickly there. He remembers that in his past life, he only knew weak martial techniques of poor quality from the market. He recalls with dismay how he was considered a complete fool, incapable of mastering even the basics back then. The young man is filled with determination upon realizing that he finally has access to the most powerful techniques of all. The master watches him with a proud smile on his face, seeing the young man's genuine enthusiasm for his new studies. The man approaches and warns provocatively that this initial technique is only a small part of the power. He explains that the boy could learn even deeper secrets if he becomes an official temple disciple. The master asks if he still wants to run away from Wuding, and the young man changes the subject, saying the place isn't that bad after all. Wai-young asks if an official disciple can work in secular commerce, and the man explains the rules there. The protagonist's eyes shine with ambition when imagining the possibility of managing a large group of merchants. The master clarifies that it is possible to become a guardian in the secular world with the proper permission from the sect leader. The boy hands the day's correspondence to another monk, thinking that the work isn't so bad after all. With the deliveries finished, the young man says goodbye happily to go rest, but is stopped by his superior's firm voice. The man asks where he thinks he is going, considering there are still many important tasks left to do. He warns coldly that the young man's obligations have changed and that he must now take care of all the pavilion's paperwork. The hero is infuriated to note the arrogance of that master, who decides everything without even consulting him first. He grinds his teeth in anger, seeing his hopes of having a quiet routine destroyed by the man. The young man begins to shout, inconsolable, complaining about the unfair change in his employment contract with the sect. The man just closes his eyes calmly, totally ignoring the young man's desperate shouts and complaints. Protagonist continues to shout heavy insults at the local monks, leaving the master with a vein bulging on his forehead. Without patience for any more insolence, the man delivers a quick and extremely painful punch right to the pit of the young man's stomach. The young man loses his breath immediately and lets out a moan of pure pain while trying to recover from the brutal impact. Fallen to his knees on the dirt ground, the young man hears the masters say in a frightening tone that he seems to want to meet his end soon. The man stares at him seriously and warns that disobeying a sect superior is an extremely grave infraction there. Trembling with terror on the ground, the hero realizes that this rigid place doesn't accept games and that he must obey. A desperate cry for help echoes loudly through the mountain skies under the strong sunlight of that training day. A heavy rainstorm begins to fall over the beautiful and imposing structures of the main Wudong temple. The young man runs desperately through the open courtyard, trying to protect himself from the cold water falling intensely from the gray sky. He rushes into a pavilion, hurrying to finally escape that sudden heavy rain. The hero begins to wring out his wet clothes on the floor of the room, grumbling about the bad weather that ruined his day. He removes his soaked coat with great discouragement while trying to dry himself a bit so he doesn't end up getting sick there. The young man shows off his well-trained physique after 2 months of intense work running all over the mountain. He realizes that his heavy delivery routine has ended up greatly strengthening his physical body over the weeks. He remembers that the master changed his position without warning, but recognizes that the heavy training was well worth it. The hero smiles, satisfied, to see that the level of his magical bamboo scroll shop has increased along with his strength. The gold shining screen displays new options for skills and talents that he can now buy with his savings. He analyzes the long list of new talents and realizes there are too many options for him to be able to read everything. The young man has a lot of fun with the situation, feeling that he is playing a game of evolving his own character. But his moment of joy is interrupted by another painful blow from the master, who appears by surprise behind him. Wayang falls to the ground, complaining about the surprise blow, but the master demands to know why he left footprints on the floor. The master points to the water marks and orders him train more until he can walk without leaving any trace at all on the floor. The young man realizes that although he is rough, the master is actually helping him improve by using strikes on his pressure points. With great effort, he feels he has finally reached the minimum level required by his demanding training supervisor. The master smiles, satisfied, and warns that the young man is finally ready to start training in the main pavilion. The young man asks hopefully if his finance service is over, but the master warns he will continue working. He warns that as soon as the weather improves, the two will go together to the pavilion to meet the new disciples. The master reminds him that these new disciples will be considered the young man's older brothers if he is promoted. The protagonist accepts the condition in silence while observing the grand structure of the temple in the daylight. Wayang follows his superior at a slow pace while preparing himself mentally for the new tasks to come. He wonders with great expectation if he will finally start learning the true martial arts of the sect. He remembers that it was Master Qianghua who brought him there, but so far he has only received simple delivery tasks. Although the young man has learned the footwork technique, he feels that the old master hasn't done almost anything directly for him. Whenever he questioned the reasons for being there, the master would only answer with a smile that everything would happen in its own time. He thought that answer was quite silly at the time, but realizes that the right moment finally seems to have arrived. The young man walks anxiously and hopes that his new training companions will be friendly and easy to talk to. Suddenly, the hero is completely paralyzed with an expression of pure shock upon seeing who is in the location. The master just keeps his serene and amused look while observing the astonishment of his young student. Wayang realizes that his expectations were too high when spotting some small children in the arena. Several little boys run toward him, shouting desperately for him to fix their broken grass flutes. The hero points indignantly at the children and asks if he will really have to call those little boys his superiors. He shouts in protest, claiming that it is absurd since he is an adult man and much older than them. He complains a lot about having to show so much respect to children who are at least 10 years younger than him. The master replies calmly, saying that this is common in the martial world, but the boy keeps thinking everything is unfair. The young man tries to use his temporary position as an excuse so he doesn't have to treat the children with so much formality. The man reassures him, saying that he doesn't need to call them that yet, and that he will have time to get used to it there. The master says goodbye quickly and uses his agile technique to fly away from there, leaving the boy behind. Wayang is left completely reactionless upon being abandoned alone in the courtyard, surrounded by those curious children. A slightly older young man approaches from behind him and asks if he is the new disciple who just arrived. The newcomer assumes a firm and imposing posture, staring at the protagonist in a quite intimidating manner. He demands an immediate answer from the hero, who just stares at him with a look of discouragement because of the other's arrogance. The young man responds simply and deduces that stock-up kid must be the oldest senior disciple in that group. The boy scolds the hero because of his informal tone, and the hero complains mentally about how annoying the children are. The senior introduces himself proudly by the Taoist name Myeongsung and warns the hero coldly not to forget it. He accuses the protagonist of disrupting the focus and order of the sect by bringing silly toys to the temple. The boy complains that the other children don't train properly because of the grass flutes the young man had been selling. The protagonist just narrows his eyes quite thoughtfully in the face of the annoying lecture from that young senior. Wayang asks provocatively if the boy is referring to the simple grass flute as a mere toy. He realizes that the boy is actually jealous and that he probably fought with the others because he also wanted one. The hero decides to calm the young senior's spirits and places the small green flute near his lips to play. He takes a deep breath and prepares to show all his musical talent with the small instrument made of leaves. An extremely soft and pleasant sound begins to echo through the training courtyard, leaving the senior quite impressed. The beautiful melody makes several green leaves fly through the air, creating an atmosphere of pure peace and harmony in that place. The other children start clapping with joy, while the arrogant senior is left completely speechless there. The young man finishes playing and suggests with a smile that the young senior set a good example for the other, smaller disciples. He says that if the senior uses the flute only during rest hours, the other little boys will certainly do the same. With great politeness, the hero bows and offers the grass flute as a gift directly to the boy. The young senior extends his hand timidly and accepts the beautiful gift offered by the sect's new disciple. He turns red with embarrassment while accepting, as the other little boys whisper among themselves about the senior's attitude. Suddenly, a harsh voice arises in the courtyard, calling that melody vulgar and ruining the entire pleasant atmosphere from before. The two turn around, surprised, and spot another larger boy approaching with slow steps and arms crossed. Myeongsung is annoyed by the sudden interruption and asks harshly what the big guy wants there. The newcomer displays an extremely arrogant and confident posture, demonstrating that he is not afraid of the senior there. The protagonist is very confused by the similarity of the names of those boys, which seem quite hard to memorize. The big guy provokes Myeongsung, saying he should be ashamed of acting in that silly way in front of the younger ones. The big guy roars with great fury, claiming that the young man is at a totally different level of audacity. He approaches with slow steps and asks harshly if the young man is the so-called grass flute merchant. The hero thinks that the expression of that arrogant boy is so scary that it could frighten anyone. The younger disciple tries to calm the big guy's spirits, saying he will educate the new arrival himself. The big guy roars furiously upon hearing the younger one call a simple merchant a younger brother of the training yard. Upon learning that the young man is just a temporary member, the big guy immediately deduces who that guy is. He mocks the hero's age, saying it is ridiculous for someone so old to try to become an official disciple of the clan. But before the big guy can do anything, the young senior who received the flute decides to take a step forward. Sung interferes in the conversation and asks harshly if the big guy has completely lost his mind. With the hilt of his wooden sword, he pushes away the hand of the big guy, who was pointing at the hero's face. The young senior positions himself firmly and protectively right in front of his new pavilion companion. He orders the opponent to stop that at once, stating that the hero is now his younger brother. The big guy reacts with extreme irritation and asks if the senior really wants to settle that dispute with force. Sung asks if the opponent is afraid to fight, leaving the protagonist quite confused in the middle of that. The young man sits on the arena floor and wonders what on earth he is doing in the middle of that childish confusion. The younger disciple approaches the hero and explains in a low voice that the rivals are students of another sect master. He reveals that their masters don't get along, and for that reason, the students are always fighting and disputing territory. The big guy shouts, ordering the senior to move out of the way because he needs to give a severe punishment to the new merchant. Sung replies, saying the young man is his student and that only he has the right to punish or train the newbie there. The big guy ignores the warning and advances with a quick attack with his wooden sword to start the official duel. The senior draws his wooden weapon with determination and warns that he will explain the rules through his own combat. The big guy smiles in a mean way and prepares to deliver a powerful attack against the opponent in the arena. The two exchange quick strikes, and their wooden swords collide with extreme violence in the middle of the open courtyard. The younger one counts excitedly the statistics of previous fights between the two rivals who have faced each other many times. He claims that senior Sung will certainly win, while the hero watches everything, finding the rivalry silly. Young observes the quick movements of the two combatants and realizes that things seem different to him. Thanks to his recent training, he can now clearly see the flow of energy in the enemy strikes. He notes that both of their movements are based on the same quick movement techniques he learned before. With this valuable knowledge, the hero can easily predict what the final result of that dispute will be. Without any doubt, senior Sung manages to connect a precise strike that hits the rival's body squarely. The big guy is thrown backward by the strong impact and ends up falling on his back on the training courtyard ground. He slides through the arena dirt, totally defeated after receiving that accurate strike from his great rival. The victorious senior breathes pantingly due to the combat exhaustion, but maintains his firm combat posture. He orders the fallen opponent to leave there soon, officially decreeing his beautiful victory in that duel. The big guy complains about the harsh treatment while trying to get up from the ground with the help of his companions. Suddenly, another boy approaches with a challenging smile on his face, ready to start another combat there. He asks in a provocative tone if the victorious senior would have the courage to accept one more fight challenge now. The senior spins his wooden sword in the air, demonstrating that he does not intend to run away from any combat in that courtyard. Young observes the scene with concern noting that his senior is already at the limit of his physical strength there. The new challenger assumes his combat posture with his sword raised and warns that he is ready to fight now. The hero thinks that those children lead a martial life that is too intense for the young age they possess. He knows that the senior is about to collapse from extreme exhaustion, but is impressed by his determination. However, the young man realizes that the young senior's fighting spirit is about to reach his physical limit. With the quick movement, the swords collide again, and one of their weapons ends up flying far away from the force of the blow. The opponent's wooden sword stops, very close to the face of the tired senior, decreeing the end of that combat. The winning boy smiles mischievously while celebrating his victory, while the senior tries to catch his breath. Immediately afterward, another younger disciple takes a step forward with his wooden sword and requests the next duel. He asks mischievously if the senior is going to run away from the combat now that he is tired and without strength to fight. The young senior gives a slight challenging smile and tells the opponent to stop the chatter and advance for the fight. The two young warriors advance quickly and collide their wooden swords, starting yet another dispute. The protagonist watches everything in silence from afar, while realizing that the children have started an elimination combat. He notes that only a few boys on his side know how to fight well, but that the situation of the others is quite worrying. Young observes that most of the disciples in his pavilion are actually just small children without training. Even if they have plenty of energy, the small difference in age and physical strength makes all the difference in the arena. Without a skilled enough warrior to change the turn of the fights, the hero knows the result will be disastrous. It doesn't take long for the last disciple on his side to be knocked out, decreeing the total defeat of his group. With victory guaranteed, the arrogant big guy walks slowly in the direction of the hero, who remains seated on the ground. He stands before the protagonist with a look of extreme superiority, celebrating the crushing defeat of the younger ones. The big guy smiles maliciously and says that now he will finally be able to teach that humble merchant a good lesson. Young thinks to himself that those little boys ended up getting into that heavy fight just to protect him. Seeing the children's suffering and sadness, the hero confesses to himself that he will feel very guilty if he doesn't act. The hero then stands up with determination and challenges the opponent, suggesting that the two fight for real right now. That the protagonist takes a firm step forward, facing the big guy with an extremely serious and intimidating look. He is annoyed by the other's arrogance and seriously considers using a bit of his true agility power. The big guy mocks the challenge, saying he might forgive the young man if he decides to kneel and beg for mercy. Without showing the slightest sign of fear, the hero just responds with a short swear word, demonstrating all his disdain. The opponent clenches his fist with great anger and warns that the young man will pay very dearly for refusing a peaceful exit. Young mocks the big guy's appearance, making fun of the fact that he looks too old for his young age. Completely furious with the jokes, the opponent yells in anger and delivers a violent punch toward the protagonist. The big guy roars with hatred while trying to hit the hero, who just dodges his onslaught with great ease. He continues delivering quick strikes in the air, but the young man moves agilely, avoiding all the brutal attacks. Though protagonist smiles mockingly, maintaining absolute calm in the face of the desperate attempts of his strong opponent. He realizes that although the rival has more internal energy, his own martial perception is far superior to his. The young man knows that his long life experience watching fights in the past gave him a great tactical advantage. Furthermore, he notes that all the big guy's steps are based on the same basic techniques he already dominates well. With his complete mastery of the footwork technique, the hero can easily predict every movement of the enemy. The big guy is astonished to realize that his punch went straight through, without even touching the young merchant's body. He looks to the side, totally confused, unable to understand how a mere beginner managed to dodge so quickly. The opponent stares at his own empty fist, trying to decipher the supernatural agility demonstrated by the protagonist. Meanwhile, the hero retreats a few steps while feeling extreme fatigue, starting to take a toll on his muscles. He realizes he made a calculation error, forgetting that his current bodies still doesn't have enough internal energy. He knows his footwork perception is excellent, but that alone won't be enough to beat the opponent who is stronger. Without enough internal energy, the hero recognizes that his agility alone won't be enough to defeat him. He reflects that the other children have trained their spiritual strength for years, being far superior to him in that aspect. He knows that if he receives a single direct attack from that strong adversary, it will be his definitive end in that combat. Faced with that dangerous situation, the young man decides he needs to risk everything on one last and bold move in the arena. The two combatants face each other fixedly, with extremely focused looks, awaiting the decisive moment of the fight. Young decides to make a risky bet and jumps toward the opponent to try to end the dispute once and for all. The big guy reacts quickly and delivers a violent punch right toward the protagonist's face in the air. The blow grazes the young man's neck with great speed, creating a strong gust of wind in the arena. The adversary is shocked to realize that his punch passed incredibly close, but still didn't hit the target. Young performs a millimeter perfect dodge backward, falling clumsily clumsily to avoid the direct punch. The young man falls on his back on the hard courtyard ground, suffering the strong impact of the fall after his desperate dodge there. The small disciples watch the fall with expressions of pure panic and concern about the state of their new friend. They are apprehensive upon seeing the hero fallen in the dirt, while dust begins to rise through the training yard. The impact of the young man's fall is so strong that it cracks the stone floor, creating a small cloud of dust. Wai-young remains stretched out on his back on the ground, while the big guy watches him from afar with a look of mistrust. The big guy checks to see if everything is okay with his own body, surprised that he didn't receive any counterattack. Suddenly, an extremely harsh voice echoes loudly through the training yard, demanding to know what is happening. The finance master and the long-haired warrior appear at the pavilion portal, staring at the confusion in the courtyard. The master who just arrived shouts with all the fury in the world, asking what on earth they are doing there. The fat and scary boy stammers nervously, trying to find a good excuse to get rid of the master's scolding. A strong and heavy hand is placed firmly directly on the head of the young man, who trembles with fear at the presence. The mustachioed master holds the scared boy, who tries to explain himself very humbly, calling him master. The man with the mustache explains that he ran to the location after hearing a big confusion, but stopped to analyze the situation. The group's senior holds Wai-young carefully, while the young man seems to be extremely injured after the fall in the arena. The hero spits a huge amount of blood suddenly, startling his companion who is holding him carefully. The mustachioed master closes his eyes, bored, and says that all of that seems to be just a small, silly fight between children. Cheong-yu taps the hero lightly, making him cough up blood while asking if that really was just a little fight. He questions if beating up someone weak and without martial training can really be considered a simple, silly fight. With an extremely irritated and serious look, the senior orders the aggressor to apologize to Wai-young right now. The senior demands that the apology be made at that very moment in a very firm way in front of everyone there. Wai-young scratches his nose and realizes that the political tensions between the sect leaders are much greater than he thought. He reflects in silence that the senior used the moment only to put even more pressure on his great rivals. The mustachioed master grinds his teeth with great anger upon realizing the public humiliation his pavilion is suffering. He puts his hand on his disciple's back and orders with disdain that he apologize at once to end that. The fat opponent bows in shame before the hero and mumbles a very forced apology for what happened. The irritated master turns his back to everyone and orders his group to accompany him back to the training lodging. Wai-young gets up quickly and shouts, telling the group to wait a second before leaving in such a hurried way. He waves, calling everyone's attention while the senior in blue observes the bold attitude of his pavilion companion. The hero points to his own bruised face and asks if they don't intend to hear the opinion of the real victim there. The master turns around with disdain and questions what else the boy wishes to demand, now that he has already received his apology. With a very mischievous smile on his face, the young man warns that he doesn't desire anything too grand or difficult to be fulfilled there. He extends his hand in a begging way and asks for an amount of money to manage to cover his expenses with medicine. The master is shocked to hear the request for money, and the hero demands the payment of 2 silver coins as fair compensation. The young man asks innocently if that amount is excessive, while knowing very well that he is charging a high price. He reflects that a silver coin is worth a lot of money but decides to use moral blackmail to get what he wants so much. He argues provocatively that a renowned wooing master would never be cheap enough to deny medicine. The mustachioed master reaches into his traditional robes with great anger to get the money demanded by the boy. The protagonist catches the coins in the air with a big smile on his face, celebrating because his masterstroke worked so well. The master stares at him with a level look and demands to know the name of the young man, who introduces himself proudly as Wai-young. The man turns his back and starts to walk away with firm and irritated steps after being extorted in such a shameful way. The master warns in a threatening tone that he will remember that name very well while moving away from the courtyard with his group of students. The hero keeps the coins happily in his bag, while the senior in blue just clears his throat with great discouragement. The senior suggests keeping the silver coins, but the protagonist hugs his money and tells him to stop with that silly talk. He warns that he earned that money with his own sweat and effort, telling the senior not to try any silly tricks there. The senior ignores the shouts and praises the spectacular theatrical performance that the young man put on by pretending to be seriously injured there. The man says he found it hilarious to see the young man jump in the air and throw himself on the ground alone, and the hero is startled by being discovered. He reveals that he watched everything from the beginning, and the boy complains about him not interfering earlier to help him in the fight. The senior asks if the hero doesn't feel ashamed for getting beaten so badly by children much younger than him. The protagonist cleans his ear with total disdain and states that he doesn't feel the slightest shame for his performance in the arena. He argues that he is just a simple merchant and that it would be impossible to beat someone who trains martial arts every day. The senior clenches his fist threateningly and warns that even though he isn't his master, he needs to teach a little respect. Young makes a bored expression and warns that he has no interest in learning that type of respect from warriors. Suddenly, the senior widens his eyes upon noting the insolent and disrespectful attitude of his young training companion. A huge explosion of dust and wind hits the training yard floor, creating a scene of extreme tension in the location. With a somber look, the senior warns that the martial world has rigid rules that must be followed by everyone in there. He walks calmly in the direction of the younger disciples, while warning the hero not to tense his physical body. The senior smashes the hero's face against the cracked ground, warning with a clenched fist that he will get hurt if he isn't careful. With smoke coming out of his head and his face glued to the stone floor, the hero screams desperately, asking the senior to wait a little. From that remarkable day on, a new tiring routine full of challenges was added to the protagonist's daily life. The daily training with Senior Manhwa was extremely simple but required a lot of physical effort from the poor young man. The worst part of the day was when the training ended, because the young man simply ended up getting beaten until his exhaustion. The senior called that torture a pressure massage, but the pain was infinitely greater than that of other masters. Young realizes that the pain of that massage lasts much longer and decides that he has finally reached his limit there. Fallen on the stone ground, the young man decides he needs to urgently use his bamboo scrolls talent shop. He planned to save money to buy legendary skills, but realizes that he won't be able to handle the senior's blows for much longer. The hero opens the floating menu and sees that the intense training has unlocked several new talent options in his shop. He remembers that he still has the 2 silver coins he managed to extort from the mustachioed master in the temple courtyard. He navigates through the cheap options, searching for something useful that can help him resist those painful training sessions of today. The young man focuses his attention on the list of cheap skills while praying to find the best defensive option there. He uses the 2 valuable silver coins to complete the purchase of the new talent that he needs so much at that moment. A shining screen appears, warning about the completion of the purchase and leaving the young merchant extremely happy and confident. The long-haired master watches the boy with a gentle smile, without having the slightest idea of what just happened there. Manhwa asks if the young man is finally starting to feel the great results of all his effort in training. While the boy trains with the weights, the senior continues insisting that the young man will soon see the rewards of that routine. The protagonist responds with disdain, stating that the training routine has actually been pure agony for his body. The senior layman's hearing that, as he hoped the young man would find some joy in observing his own growth. He clenches his fist with the energy and warns with a friendly smile that the 2 must start the daily routine of beatings now. The man advises the boy to relax his body because the pain of the impacts tends to be much worse for those who stay very tense. The senior delivers a devastating energy blow that hits the protagonist's chest and spreads smoke throughout the arena. The young man lets out a strong moan of pain upon receiving the brutal direct impact, but notices something very strange with his body. The hero cracks a confident smile upon realizing that the blow no longer hurts as much as it did on previous previous days. He celebrates having bought the resistant body talent for 2 silver coins, seeing that the investment was worth it. The young man realizes that the basic low-level talent is much stronger than he imagined and starts to laugh with joy. He concludes that he doesn't need to accumulate fortunes if he can simply collect several low-level talents in his body. The young man imagines with great ambition that he will be able to become the most powerful warrior in the world using only cheap talents. The senior is confused and asks why the young man's body suddenly seems to have become so resistant to his attacks. The long-haired man decides to ignore the doubt and prepares to deliver another powerful blow of energy on the young man. The senior smiles, saying that since the boy is stronger, he will now be able to hit with much more force during training. The master attacks with a devastating punch that makes the hero remember a very valuable lesson he had forgotten before. A huge explosion hits the arena, and the boy remembers that cheap things always have some hidden defect in the end. The little boy from the pavilion spies over the stone wall, frightened by the noise of that violent energy explosion. The little one runs to Hwayoung, who has fallen on the ground steaming, and asks worriedly if his friend is okay after the blow. The boy suggests that he yell in pain so the senior feels pity, but the hero warns that this trick never works with him there. The little boy offers to talk to the master, but the hero begs him not to do that and not to make things even worse. The boy wishes a safe trip for the hero, who says goodbye, waving while walking back to the finance pavilion. The young man follows his path with his body aching, thinking about how his life turned into a true survival test. Hwayoung reflects in silence that the concern of that friendly little boy actually only makes things more embarrassing. Protagonist sighs tired and repeats to himself that he needs to find a way to run away from that sect as fast as possible. The mustachioed finance master warns that there is no work for the hero today and orders him to go way back to his room. The boy tries to insist that he wants to help, but the master complains about his fakeness and orders him to go train in another pavilion. The protagonist stays in absolute silence for a few moments, pretending to be quite sad with his rejection. He throws himself on the ground, begging dramatically for work, and the master kicks him, ordering him to stop being so pathetic there. Suddenly, the boy's dramatic acting is interrupted by a messenger who arrives, asking for permission to enter the room. The messenger warns that a large market is opening and that the merchants of the region requested an armed escort from Wudang. The man reveals that dozens of guilds will participate, and the hero fallen on the ground is shocked to realize it will be a huge event. He knows that these merchants are extremely rich and that it makes total sense for them to pay the high fees charged by the sect. Finance Master calculates that 10 men will be enough and asks, what is the total amount that the merchants offered? The master celebrates the large offer of coins, but the hero thinks with anger that those rich merchants are actually stingy. The protagonist is outraged to discover that the merchants pay a pittance for the escort of the Wudang warriors. The messenger explains that they intend to buy a lot of salt because the merchants offered a large discount on the lot. Hwayoung loses control and shouts, asking if they have gone completely crazy by accepting that absurd deal. The master grabs him by the collar, but the boy apologizes and insists that the price charge for salt is totally ridiculous. The master replies, saying that he wasn't even born at the time, and the hero remembers in a panic that he just regressed in time. He reflects in silence that the real price of salt he remembers from his past life should actually be half of that. The young man tries to understand what he is missing in that negotiation, while the others continue talking in the room. He finally realizes that the old empire salt trade system hasn't been changed yet at that time. He remembers that originally, merchants needed a very rare imperial license to be able to sell salt. That method served as a great financial incentive for merchants who traveled to the country's borders. With this, the border areas became the great distribution center and salt was sold to the entire territory. That old commercial model was called the Gaijung system, but ended up being totally abolished by the central government. The imperial government then decided to replace it with a new and rigid policy officially called the Jilsake system. By that new rule, all the Empire's salt became controlled and sold directly by government agencies. The hero confesses to himself that he never knew the real reason for the old model having been cancelled so quickly. He imagines that the Empire was just waiting for a good opportunity to withdraw the immense power from the salt merchants. Anyway, the new law made salt very easy to obtain and caused the product's price to plummet in the market. The young man remembers very well that the product's value fell to less than half the price that is currently charged there. The protagonist begins to reflect deeply on what he should do with that information so valuable in his hands. He knows that the change will happen very soon, and that the Wudang sect will suffer a giant loss if it buys the lot now. The hero deduces that the Shanxi merchants already knew about the new law and tried to pull a scam on the sect to clear the stock. Worried about the situation, he approaches the mustachioed master and touches his shoulder lightly to alert him of the danger. He warns firmly for the master not to close the salt purchase, as he does not intend to let his own sect be fooled. The master asks what he knows about the subject and remembers how rare it is for those merchants to offer any discount. The boy replies, asking if the master doesn't find it strange that such stingy people offer a discount for no reason. The master ignores the warning, saying that the boy is just paranoid and that merchants always seek only profit. The protagonist knows that when a merchant reduces the price drastically, there is always a hidden motive behind it. The finance master crosses his arms with great seriousness and asks if the boy can really take responsibility for what he says. The young man opens a big, confident smile and answers without hesitation that he takes total responsibility for his words. He already begins to imagine all the fame and admiration he will receive from all the temple members when his prediction comes true. The hero continues lost in his ambitious thoughts until the deep voice of the finance master brings him back to reality. The master stares at him with extreme seriousness and orders that he repeat all those accusations directly to the sect leader. The young merchant is left completely speechless and stammers in astonishment upon discovering before whom he will have to speak. The boy widens his eyes and feels his body sweat cold upon realizing the monumental mess he has just gotten himself into. The two pass through the large double doors and enter with slow steps into the main audience hall of the sacred temple. The leader of the Wudang sect, named Chiang Ai, observes the two with the serene look of one of the greatest warriors in the world. The finance master thinks that the boy is very bold but wants to see if he will maintain the same attitude in front of the supreme leader. He watches the young man from afar, waiting to see if he will have the courage to repeat his hunch while looking into the leader's eyes. The supreme leader of Wudang recognizes the boy and remembers that the long-haired master had already commented on him before. Although he doesn't see anything special in the young man at first sight, the leader trusts in the excellent judgment of his sect brother. The elder starts the official meeting and demands to know why they shouldn't close the salt purchase in the Yicheng market. Quite nervous, the mustachioed master tries to dodge the blame, saying that that idea wasn't actually his. The supreme leader stares at him with severity and reminds him that as pavilion master, the final responsibility is totally his. The elder demands he speak soon and warns that if the proposal doesn't have solid evidence, he will be severely punished for it. The mustachioed master panics totally and stammers without knowing what to say while looking at the protagonist, begging for help. The hero lets out a long and tired sigh upon realizing that he will have to take control of that complicated conversation there. He takes a step forward with his hand raised and warns directly that he doesn't actually belong to that finance pavilion. The sect leader tilts his head, intrigued, and replies, saying that the boy is there precisely because he is part of the pavilion. The protagonist responds calmly that his presence in that finance location at least wasn't a choice of his. The supreme leader of Wudang narrows his eyes and stares at the young man with an extremely sharp and mystery-laden look. The finance master gets nervous, and the supreme leader warns that he will ask the question directly to the disciple Manhwa. The leader explains that an opportunity to buy salt at a discount is rare, and that others will certainly try to close the deal. With an extremely serious look, the elder demands to know the real reason for the young man trying to prevent the product's purchase. The protagonist responds calmly and assures the supreme leader of Wudang that they still have plenty of free time. He crosses his arms with a confident smile and states that the main merchants of Huzhou won't touch that deal. The supreme leader of Wudang fixes his sharp look on the young man and demands that he present solid proof of his claims. The hero reveals that the son of a merchant king is in the temple and suggests that the leader ask the question directly to him. He cites the famous Yeo family, and the supreme leader orders the finance master in a hurry to bring the young student to the room. The finance master runs out of the hall desperately, while the protagonist remains waiting with total serenity. A short time later, a young long-haired disciple presents himself shyly in the hall after being summoned urgently. The newcomer bows quite respectfully and introduces himself as the young secular disciple Yeo Hong Yang. The supreme leader confirms the boy's identity and warns that he called him only to ask questions about the salt market. The elder questions if it is true that the great merchants of Huo won't participate in the market, and the boy confirms. The leader asks the reason for his family's absence in such a large market, and the boy tries to explain what he knows there. The long-haired boy reveals that, in fact, none of the 15 great families of his region intends to enter the market. The supreme leader of Wudang closes his eyes and remains thoughtful upon seeing that the finance boy's prediction was right. The elder dismisses the boy, while the hero makes a funny expression of victory for having proven his point. The sect leader confesses in silence that he finally began to understand the reason for so much attention given to the bold boy. He remembers the proverb about saving a child about to fall into the well and wonders if the hero acted for the sect's sake today. The elder reflects that in the past, he preferred not to get involved in finances, but realizes that the situation now is very critical. Looking at the astute young man's face, the leader realizes that he simply cannot ignore the boy's great talent. He concludes that letting his sect walk straight into a giant loss would be the same as seeing a child fall into the well. The elder stares at the protagonist quite directly and asks how he managed to discover that secret information. The hero smiles mysteriously and changes the subject, saying that his method of investigation is actually a trade secret. He warns that the salt business will fail and suggests that the supreme leader wait a little longer before closing the contract. The elder agrees to cancel the advance payment for the salt, but makes a surprising decision that changes the course of things. He orders that the two travel personally to the market to carry out the product's purchase, and the master accepts the order. The hero is indignant and shouts that the leader didn't understand anything of his advice, as they shouldn't buy anything now. The elder puts his hand on the finance master's shoulder, irritated, and warns that he was talking directly to Muk Wyung. The boy is left completely reactionless and lets out a sound of astonishment upon realizing that the shopping mission was given to him. The supreme leader stands up from his imposing chair with a look of extreme authority and stares at the young merchant. He orders coldly that the boy take the finance master with him to the Yiqing market to bring the salt back. The leader warns that if he fails to buy the salt at a much cheaper price, he will receive an extremely severe punishment. The protagonist falls into total despair and shouts, claiming that the mission imposed on him is completely unfair. He complains a lot about having to bargain with the smart-chunksy merchants without being able to use advance payment. The supreme leader explains the true reason for the sect to trade salt goes far beyond paying the clan's expenses. He reveals that the real objective is to guarantee a stable supply of salt for the needy population of the entire province. He concludes that since the boy made them lose the discount of the agreement, it is fair that the boy himself pay for the price difference. The elder provokes the boy, asking if he actually has no talent for negotiation despite calling himself a merchant. Wyung hits his own chest, outraged by the elder's audacity in making him negotiate the sect's purchases for free. The boy warns furiously that he possesses a very high-level talent for commerce and makes it very clear that he doesn't work for free. The elder agrees with the complaint and decides to offer a fair financial reward to motivate the young merchant. He promises to give 1% of the value saved in the salt purchase in case the boy manages a lower price than the market one. The boy begins to do several quick mathematical calculations in his brilliant merchant mind to evaluate the proposal. Young demands 10%, but the elder immediately replies, offering only 3% as a payment counter proposal. The young man asks for 8%, but the finance master despairs, while the leader defines the final value at 5%. The boy opens a huge, greedy smile and accepts the agreement, extending his hand to close the 5% negotiation. The supreme leader defines the exact market values to ensure that the agreement's savings are calculated with precision. Young clenches his fist with a malicious smile, knowing that that small fee will yield a giant fortune for his pocket. The hero runs out of the main hall very happily, shouting at the supreme leader not to forget to fulfill the promise. The large doors close quickly, and the two temple leaders remain in silence in the main hall. The finance master asks if the leader is sure of the decision, and the elder responds that the discount will benefit the sect. The mustachioed master questions, intrigued, how the elder already knew that the young boy was so attached to money. The supreme leader of Wooden closes his eyes and takes a deep breath before starting to explain his reasoning about the boy. The elder states, smiling, that someone who calls himself a merchant would never refuse a good chance to make coins. Young runs with great haste back to the training courtyard and crouches down thoughtfully near his old companions. He shouts, calling his best friend from before, while the rich boy has fun playing a small leaf flute. The friend is surprised to see the hero and asks the reason he is not working at the sect's grand headquarters. The protagonist asks, panting, if any of the disciples have any connection with the merchants of the Shanxi region. The friend thinks the request is strange and explains that those merchants would prefer to go to other temples closer there. The other secular disciples who were sitting in the courtyard agree totally with the colleague's logical explanation. The hero warns that he already imagined that, but needed to ask anyway, leaving his best friend very confused there. He reveals that the rich Shanxi merchants are going to the Yicheng market, only to sell their salt stock. The friend doesn't see any problem with that and remembers that it is very common for outside merchants to come and sell the product in the region. Young clenches his fist with great strength, maintaining an extremely serious expression when thinking about the wickedness of those men. The hero reveals directly that that entire negotiation is actually nothing more than a dirty scam against their pavilion. His friend widens his eyes and is left completely in shock upon hearing that shocking revelation from the young merchant. The boy grinds his teeth with great anger and demands to understand what is happening behind that entire dirty story. He asks, irritated, if those devils from Shanxi really intend to exploit the people by charging a high price for a vital item. The boy bends down, infuriated, upon realizing that the outside rivals have the audacity to try to mess with their sacred territory. All the students start shouting furiously against the scammers, and the hero remembers that in the end, all merchants are the same. The protagonist explains, smiling, that mutual cheating is actually something quite common and routine among all merchants. He states that the main rule of the market defines that the true fool of the story is always the one who lets himself be deceived. However, he ponders that things change figure when the target of the scam becomes the very territory where they live. The boy explains that although they seem greedy, the local merchants possess a strong love for their native land and their people. He concludes that the region's merchants will always be the first to rise in defense when an outside rival attacks. The young merchant knows that their motivation is financial but prefers to omit that detail to keep the group's focus. His best friend is quite curious and asks how exactly the Shanxi rivals intend to deceive everyone there. He argues that people are not silly to accept price manipulation, and a voice arises behind him, answering the doubt. The newcomer approaches with slow steps and asks if the protagonist's name is really the disciple Muk Wai-young. The rich boy Yeo Hong Yang scratches his cheek, embarrassed, and approaches the two friends who were talking in the temple courtyard. With a very friendly smile, the young hare asks if the hero could talk to him in private for a moment. The two walk away from the group and walk side by side along the immense and silent stone staircases of the grand sect. The hero adopts a serious expression and asks directly how the protagonist managed to discover that secret. Wai-young pretends he didn't understand the question and asks in a confused way what subject the colleague is referring to there. The boy asks if he is talking about the future abolition of the salt law, and the hare becomes quite tense at the speech. The young hare is left completely speechless upon realizing that the hero really knows the most secret information. The protagonist observes the boy with attention and concludes that that fragile posture from before was just a planned play. He deduces that the hare pretended to be weak to hide his status as the son of the merchant king and avoid calling attention. The rich boy confesses, surprised, that he would never imagine finding someone there who knew so much about the government's plans. He reveals with a very serious look that even the imperial court officials in Beijing are unaware of that salt secret. He suggests that the hero has a powerful ally behind him and asks to be introduced, but the boy denies having any support. The hero insists on the subject, raising his index finger, but the protagonist continues walking without giving him importance. Wai-young warns, smiling, that the greatest weapon of a good merchant is not the sword or the speech, but the secret he guards well. The long-haired boy stares at him fixedly and asks if that vague answer should be considered a real denial. Suddenly, the hare starts to laugh out loud and in a very cheerful way, calling the attention of everyone who passed by the arena. The young man wipes a tear and confesses that he heard exactly the same advice from his father until his ears were tired. The hero shrugs mischievously and thinks that he had already learned many lessons from the king before returning in time. He asks for his new colleague's help for the business, but the boy refuses the invitation and warns that he prefers to stay out of it. He explains that the Huzhou merchants will turn a blind eye to others' profits in the salt trade. Wai-young overhears the conversation and comments with disdain that if that is how things really are, there is nothing to be done. The long-haired young man smirks and compliments how easily the protagonist understands the whole situation. The protagonist responds mockingly that it is obvious, since these merchants take as much as they give. Wai-young narrows his eyes and focuses his attention on his colleague's reaction to try to fish for some secret detail. The young man shocks his interlocutor by suggesting that they also ignore the smuggling done by local merchants. Desperate the revelation, the hare holds his head and asks how on earth the guy knows so many secrets. The rich boy offers a fortune to meet the young man's mysterious ally, who thinks about whether he should reveal the truth. Wai-young clears his throat to cover up and repeats gracefully that a good merchant's greatest weapon is keeping their secrets. The hero is impressed that he turned down so much money and asks if the rivals will really just sit by and watch. The colleague agrees thoughtfully, saying that in the salt trade, when one side profits, the other side ends up losing. The hero asks what his plan is, and the protagonist explains in desperation the punishment he received from the sect leader. The long-haired young man starts laughing out loud upon finally discovering what the guy was up to in the meeting room. He explains that he lied to the sect leader, and that, in the end, he managed to secure a good commission on the purchase savings. The hare insists on knowing the guy's full plan, promising to keep it a secret and betting his credibility on it. Wai-young tells him to wait a moment and leans in carefully to whisper the details of his secret plan into his ear. The here's eyes widen in shock as he listens to the young merchant's extremely bold and surprising ideas. Suddenly, a fat and arrogant man appears on the temple steps, leaving the two friends quite annoyed. The bully approaches with a mean smile and says he would also like to hear the details of that secret conversation. The rival stares at them with superiority and demands to know what they are plotting hidden in the pavilion courtyard. Wai-young retorts rudely, saying the matter is none of his business, and tells the intruder to get out of there. The big guy crosses his arms and warns that his group will be escorting the festival, so he has every right to know. He threatens to spread suspicious rumors about the protagonist throughout the sect council if they don't start talking. That the protagonist acknowledges that such a silly threat could ruin his plans and tries to come up with a way to handle it. The long-haired hare interrupts the conversation, mockingly saying that the matter is indeed none of the bully's business. The three remain staring each other down in the middle of the courtyard as the mood between them becomes increasingly tense and hostile. The long-haired young man reveals that the matter involves the merchant king and tells the rival not to meddle where he doesn't belong. He takes a step forward with an extremely serious and intimidating look, facing the bully closely in the courtyard. The hare asks if the rival group really has the courage to insult his powerful family and bear the consequences. The bully starts to sweat nervously upon sensing the scary aura and the dark gaze the rich young man is projecting. The long-haired young man challenges the rival to use all his strength if he really has the courage to face him now. Intimidated by the power of the hare's family, the bully decides to turn around and leave with his cronies. The other friends run up to them, and the young hare humbly pretends that he was just trying to drive the intruder away. He smiles in relief and warns that he put enough pressure on the rivals so they won't bother the group for a long time. Young observes the scene surprised, thinking about how the expression and attitude of that rich boy change in mere seconds. The curious friend approaches and asks what the real plan is that the protagonist has in mind for that mission. The group of disciples gathers in a tight circle to listen carefully to the secrets of the whispered plan. The long-haired hare listens attentively to every detail of the bold plan and agrees that it is worth trying. The other companions love the guy's wild strategy and agree with smiles that it will all be very fun. With a deeply wicked smile on his face, the protagonist guarantees that things will be even more fun at the market. They finally arrive at the bustling commercial city, which is full of merchants and people walking everywhere. The travel companion covers his ears, complaining about the street noise, while the protagonist walks very cheerfully beside him. The warrior shouts irritably in the middle of the crowd, trying to find out where on earth the region's blessed salt market is located. The protagonist smirk explains calmly that the salt trade usually takes place right in the heart of that city. The colleague comments that it is great to get out of the office, but reminds him that the young man's is still a disciple disguised as a butler there. The boy says he knows that very well and tells his companion to relax for once and enjoy the city's beautiful view. He looks at the intense movement in front of him and asks his companion if he knows the real meaning of it all. He points to the bags of salt and explains that all that commotion proves that the salt merchants are the ones in charge of the place. A middle-aged merchant nearby observes the arrival of the two young men with a look of pure curiosity. The man introduces himself as a Shanxi merchant, while the companion in blue introduces himself as the head of finance. The man in the traditional uniform warns that the Wudang disciples have arrived safely, but takes a brief, thoughtful pause. The middle-aged merchant mockingly asks what brings the great finance hero personally to the salt warehouse. The master responds firmly that he came to buy the product, since the sect never said it would refuse to close the deal. The merchant asks, quite ironically, what he can do for the group now that they have decided to close the deal. He crosses his arms in front of all his stock and arrogantly guarantees that he will not reduce the price by a single coin. The man warns with a mean smile that they will actually have to pay much more than the amount previously agreed upon. The merchant asks if he understands the situation, leaving the Wudang finance master totally speechless. The master tries to keep his cool and insists that they are still getting a cheap purchase despite all the difficulties. The merchant stares at the guy with disdain upon hearing that he introduces himself as an important internal disciple of that sect. The protagonist states that no merchant gives tips for free and that his valuable information has a high price. He guarantees with a mysterious smile that there is always a catch in business, leaving the merchant suspicious. The hero reveals with a very dark look that the government's old salt trade system is about to be abolished. The Shanxi merchant falls into a total panic all of a sudden and screams in disbelief at the young man's scary revelation. Desperate, the man grabs the boy and screams that with the end of the law, the value of salt will plummet to less than half very soon. The protagonist smiles as he sees the master do the math quickly and realize that the trick the rival was planning against the sect. Frightened by the possibility of a loss, the merchant desperately asks the finance master to wait a moment. The man stutters, trying to defend himself, and claims that the whole story about the new law is just a silly rumor from the capital. He argues that nothing official has been decided, and that, therefore, he hasn't charged the group of warriors any unfair amount yet. The protagonist surprises the Wuding finance master by unexpectedly agreeing with the merchant's statement. The boy explains calmly that the old law is still in effect and that the man only sold the product for the current official price. The finance master becomes furious and complains to the merchant for not having warned him about the changes beforehand. The boy warns that spreading rumors about the government would bring trouble with the court, and the sect would not escape punishment. The hero states that every merchant's duty is to sell to the highest bidder, leaving the finance master with his mouth wide open. The protagonist asks if the merchant agrees that there is nothing to be done at the moment, and the man confirms, quite nervous. The boy says goodbye to the merchant calmly and calls his stressed out master so they can finally leave that place. The master walks down the street irritably and asks how the boy could have agreed with that, if the new law will change everything soon. He complains a lot and demands to know the real reason the young man didn't tell him all those details about the law beforehand. The protagonist responds mockingly that the master was too busy being nice to that crooked merchant. He explains that now the master will be remembered as a silly customer, while he will be seen as the only clever mind around. The young man completes with a smile, saying he did all that just to ensure that the merchant prefers to negotiate with him. Sitting in a tavern, the master asks if the sect brought him there instead of sending him to Dongbai, and the young man confirms. The finance master gives a violent rap on the head to the boy, who spits out his food from the sudden blouse pain. The man drinks his tea calmly and comments that the protagonist really has a natural gift for driving others crazy. The hero complains about the pain while the Wudong finance master states with disdain that he is nothing but a noisy pest. The master asks what the next step is, and the boy replies calmly that they should just wait for the festival to end. The master questions what they will do during those 4 days of waiting, and the young man suggests taking a walk around the big fair. Suddenly, they both spot something very interesting in the middle of the crowd and let out an expression of curiosity together. The protagonist points quite cheerfully toward a pretty stall of traditional sweets he found there. The finance master looks at him very suspiciously and asks if he already has another move or master plan in progress. The man in blue pretends he is used to it and focuses on closing his eyes, trying to maintain a pose of superiority before his young companion. At another stall, the hero firmly holds the fabric of a beautiful piece of clothing to analyze the quality of the stitching. A loud sound of fabric shaking echoes through the courtyard while they continue evaluating the various products on display. The friendly local fabric seller welcomes the 2 customers who arrive with a huge smile. The merchant guarantees that his clothes are of high quality and have all been certified by the commissioner himself. The young protagonist picks up a sample of the beautiful green fabric and agrees quite thoughtfully with what the seller said. He stretches the shiny silk with his hands, confirms that the quality of the product at that stall is indeed excellent. The boy asks if they can look a bit more, and the merchant accepts, saying proudly that no one beats his pieces. The finance master is left with an extremely confused and bored expression, not understanding the direction of their walk. The man warns that he prefers to return to the inn to rest, but the boy asks if he didn't notice anything strange at the fair. The Wudang finance master turns around, very intrigued by the question, and asks what exactly he should have noticed. The boy cracks a malicious smile like someone who has just come up with a brilliant masterstroke in his mind. He explains that the market commissioner is the government official responsible for all local trade administration. All products sold at the fair mandatorily need the approval of this commissioner before they can be sold. The commissioner is also in charge of defining the best locations for the stalls according to the quality of the products. If the government official accepted bribes, he would certainly give a positive endorsement to bad goods with no quality at all. However, the protagonist realizes quickly that this definitely does not seem to be the case with the region's honest official. He concludes that the man is extremely competent in his role and would never sell notes or favor any merchant. With that in mind, the boy picks up one of the swords for sale at the fair and holds it quite firmly to evaluate its details. The hero asks the finance master to buy the beautiful weapon, but the man complains a lot, saying it costs way too much. He insists that buying that sword is a vital investment to ensure the success of future negotiations with the official. Reluctant, the Wudang finance master throws some metal coins to pay for the weapon that the boy wants so much. The protagonist leaves humming, very cheerful and satisfied, while holding his new acquisition under his arms. The boy turns suddenly and asks a quite intriguing question to his companion from the temple's finance pavilion. He asks if the master agrees that the local administrator is indeed a very fair and competent person at his job. The boy notes that the best spot in the market was given to a common shop that sells products with quite dubious quality. He questions the master in blue about what the real reason would be for such a smart administrator to make this bad decision. The young merchant gives a very mischievous side smile, indicating that he has already understood the whole mysterious secret behind the case. The protagonist reveals with confidence that the main clue is in the signature of the blacksmith who manufactured the purchased weapon. The finance master analyzes the blade with attention, but remains unable to understand the relationship between the blacksmith and the administrator. The man in blue leans his face in and focuses his gaze to be able to read the signature engraved on the metal base of that sword. He finally manages to read aloud the name of the legendary blacksmith who signed the manufacture of that beautiful combat weapon. The boy explains that he is a famous blacksmith in Beijing, but highlights there is a crucial hidden detail about his origin. The protagonist points to the ground with a huge smile, revealing that the famous artisan was actually born right there in that city. The master asks if the administrator is secretly favoring merchants who were born in his own home region. The boy responds that it is perfectly normal and human for people to try to give a helping hand to acquaintances from their own land. He explains that that locally made sword will serve as the ideal gift to win the commissioner's trust. The hero finds the situation amusing, while the finance master is shocked to see him plan a bribe with such naturalness. The master sighs in defeat, but deep down, he cannot help but admire the sharp intellect the boy has for business. The man admits that the young man possesses extraordinary talent. When the two finally reach the great Yicheng temple, the two are received in a beautiful visiting hall, where typical sweets and hot tea are already waiting for them on the round table. The market administrator examines gift received and widens his eyes upon recognizing the name of the local blacksmith on the blade. He says the weapon is worth a true fortune, and the master responds humbly that that is just a sign of respect. The hero takes the lead on the matter and warns politely that he would like to discuss directly about the current price of salt. The Yicheng official reveals that he already knows about the changes in trade, and the boy feigns relief for not needing to explain the subject. The administrator calms the two Wudang representatives and guarantees that he will keep the local brokers under his strict control. He explains that the market intermediaries will never let foreign merchants mess up the temple's economy. Listening to the confident words of the market commissioner, the protagonist cracks an extremely evil and victorious smile. He knows that the fair's brokers serve precisely to align the measures and prices charged by the rivals from outside. He reflects that if those intermediaries decide to create barriers, the foreign rivals will face serious problems. With the strict rules imposed by the honest administrator, bribing the brokers will be an impossible task for the rivals. Suddenly, very strong knocks on the lattice door interrupt the friendly dialogue that was happening inside the hall. The administrator asks what is happening, and the guard warns that one of the merchants is causing a commotion at the salt fair. The official apologizes to his guests and asks for permission to go resolve the confusion personally outside the temple. The guard closes the large wooden doors firmly, leaving only the two Wudang representatives alone in the room. The two remain seated quite calmly while they wait patiently for the return of the important official. The finance master whispers very quietly to the hero, questioning if he hadn't ordered total silence regarding the new law. The boy whispers back, explaining that the prohibition applies only to public places because it is a government secret. He takes the opportunity to grab another sweet from the table and makes a quite thoughtful face before continuing his explanation there. The boy raises a finger with a mocking smile and states that there is no problem if they leak the information indirectly. The young man remembers that many disciples of the temple act in the kingdom's commerce and serve as excellent sources of information. The hero explains that the matter affects local interests and that it was enough to give a hint for everyone to act as one at the fair. The master pours the tea into the cup, commenting that he really didn't expect that even the brokers would act so quickly. The protagonist drinks his tea and grumbles that if he had known, he would have spent the money for the sword on a much better meal than that. The Wudang finance master casts an extremely irritated and deadly look toward the cheeky young man upon hearing that statement. The man stands up from his chair, calling the boy to leave, and warns seriously that things will not go his way. The two go down the stone stairs of the main hall, walking back to the courtyard of the city's large commercial fair. The boy asks the reason for that sudden change, and the finance master tells him to look carefully in the direction of the street. The young man puts his hand on his forehead to protect himself from the bright sun and narrows his eyes. Quite confused by the commotion he spots, he focuses his vision on a distant point of the fair, trying to understand the real reason for all that strange agitation there. The protagonist sighs, discouraged, upon realizing from afar who it is that is leading the big confusion in the middle of the salt fair. The finance master observes the commotion and asks if those people creating the confusion belong to a heretical sect. The boy reveals that they actually belong to an orthodox sect, leaving his superior from the temple quite intrigued. The boy warns that he managed to identify a quite well-known person in the middle of the noisy group that is causing the commotion. The temple bully appears on the scene, and the hero concludes irritably that the rival came only to try to disrupt his business. The boy remembers the bully had abandoned temple shortly after the tense conflict he had with the family's young heir. He reflects that after being humiliated by the son of the merchant king, it would indeed be very difficult for the rival to continue there. The boy complains about his terrible luck upon seeing that his old opponent is now the one escorting the rival merchants. The crooked merchant screams furiously at the government official, demanding that he stop with those harsh demands at the fair. He accuses the market commissioner of creating rules that favor only local merchants and prevent those from outside from selling salt. The market commissioner retorts with total serenity, asking what the reason would be for them to interfere with his sales. He demands proof of the accusations and warns that insulting an imperial official without evidence will bring grave consequences in the area. The Shanxi merchant grits his teeth, very irritated, and warns that he finally understood how things work there. He guarantees arrogantly that his group possesses political influence, and that he will soon resolve that whole dispute in his favor. The protagonist observes that whole discussion from a distance, with a very subtle and confident smile stamped on his face. The young man decides to act and walks with quick and firm steps toward the confusion, asking the group to wait a moment. The boy puts his hands on his waist and warns in a provocative way that the local merchants will end up losing money this way. He faces the Shanxi rival with mockery and suggests in a friendly way that he stay very close to the salt market guards. The merchant recognizes the wooting boy and accuses him furiously of all that confusion being the result of his meddling. The boy raises his hands innocently and guarantees that he has no direct relationship with the setting of the market's price. He states that he acts only as a humble merchant and questions why the rivals use information to pull a trick in the city. The Shanxi merchant starts to sweat nervously and grinds his teeth in anger upon seeing his tricks exposed by the boy. The temple bully puts his hand on the alle's shoulder and asks him to calm down, warning him not to fall for the boy's talk. The rival explains arrogantly that commercial disputes should be resolved only among the merchants themselves. He squeezes his partner's shoulder with confidence and warns in a mean way that he is there precisely to solve the problem. The bully slowly removes his hand from his partner's shoulder, preparing himself to take the lead in the confrontation in the courtyard. The bald-headed rival proposes to the protagonist. They resolve that complex commercial dispute in a very different way. The warrior suggests using the old traditional market method, officially known as a proxy war. The bully warns that since the market guard is present at the location, they can begin the force duel immediately. The protagonist hears the proposal with total serenity, while his finance master in blue observes him quite attentively. The finance master is left with a confused and thoughtful countenance, trying to understand the real meaning of that term there. He remembers that this dispute serves as a recourse when the fault and the reasons of the two sides are not completely clear. Basically, instead of wasting time discussing who is right, the merchants decide to resolve everything through force. However, true force for a good, successful merchant obviously doesn't come from his martial techniques, but from coins. A merchant's real power at the fair is measured solely by the amount of coins he carries inside his pocket. With money, they can easily hire strong guards, making that old duel the favorite recourse of the richest ones. However, the protagonist's current situation is terrible because he indeed does not possess a single gold coin in his pocket at the moment. The boy looks with irony at the opponents, imagining that they propose the duel precisely knowing about his current misery. He concludes that they act this way knowing that he is a simple secular disciple and that he cannot use the power of the temple there. The finance master takes a step to the side and warns the young man quite seriously about his stance in that duel. The long-haired man warns in advance that if the boy planned to count on his martial help, he can forget it. The finance master warns the crooked merchant that the same applies to him regarding not using Wudang warriors. He explains that the sect does not meddle in worldly affairs, and for this reason, no Wudang guard will act in that dispute there. The merchant agrees, smiling, and says that it would be a great absurdity to use noble warriors for an insignificant fight. The man guarantees that they have already prepared their own escort, while the bald bully cracks his fists with malice. The government official worries about the hero and offers to delay the duel in case he needs to arrange another guard. The protagonist thanks him but refuses the help, saying that a real man must always keep his word. The boy walks forward and warns that since he came there as a merchant, he will fight as a merchant indeed. The temple bully smiles with malice, celebrating the great chance to finally give a well-deserved beating to the young boy. The protagonist walks slowly and responds mockingly, saying he is very happy about this opportunity for his rival. The young man makes a sign with his finger, provoking the opponent, and tells him to come at him with everything he has at that moment. The two duelists take their positions on the temple's long stone walkway, waiting for the signal to start the combat. Suddenly, the young bald-headed opponent turns to the side upon hearing a voice calling for his sect leader title. The opponent encounters the arrival of a mysterious man and asks, surprised, what brings him to that salt fair there. The imposing bearded newcomer is recognized by everyone in the courtyard as the renowned leader of the Hong Mun Hack Pavilion. He explains that he came to check the situation of the young master and suggests taking over the combat personally for security reasons. The bully refuses arrogantly, claiming that the opponent is very weak and not worth the effort of a great martial leader. The protagonist comments, smirking, that for an instant, he thought they were indeed going to swap fighters in the arena. The bully retorts, saying that he would never miss the opportunity to beat the boy violently until he turned into dust. The market official warns the hero that the rival is the heir of a large sect and that he is not just a common fighter. The boy tells him not to worry because, against the strong warrior, it would be difficult, but against the fat, bald one, it will be a piece of cake. The government official sighs, worried, but accepts the young man's firm decision and moves to the corner of the stone arena. He assumes his role as official judge and begins to explain aloud the traditional rules of that commercial duel. The man warns that the loser of the proxy dispute will be obliged to accept all the conditions of the winner without complaining. He explains that in case the young master wins, the rival merchants will be able to sell salt without the intermediation of the guards there. On the other hand, if the hero wins, the Shanxi merchants will be obliged to follow the local salt rules strictly. The judge raises his firm hand in the air and asks the two combatants if there is any objection before starting the duel. He orders the start of the dispute, and the protagonist advances with extreme speed toward his opponent on the walkway. The boy smiles confidently, thinking that last time he let the rival hit him out of distraction, but that now it would be quite different. He decides to take the initiative of the attack, advancing with a violent punch to try to end the duel quickly. The hero widens his eyes in fright upon seeing a metal blade shining right in front of his face unexpectedly. The temple bully opens an extremely mean and cowardly smile while wielding a sword against the unarmed boy. The rival delivers a powerful sword blow, forcing the protagonist to perform a quick acrobatic jump backward. The young man lands on the ground and shouts, indignant, asking where that weapon came from and accusing the opponent of cheating there. The fat bald man runs toward him, laughing, and states that weapons were never prohibited and that was always his sword. The opponent attacks again, delivering blows, and warns in a mocking way that he will use only the dull side of the sword's blade. He stares at the hero with arrogance and says that if he has any problem with that, he should get his own sword as well. The protagonist sweats nervously before that unfair situation and complains about his adversary's nonsensical excuse there. He dodges desperately from the sword blows, while remembering in panic that he never trained armed combat before. The bully's blade hits the stone ground with violence, creating a strong impact and spreading dust through the courtyard there. The crooked merchant cheers with joy in the cheering section and screams, telling his warrior to break the boy's bones for good. The judge suggested interrupting the fight, but the finance master crosses his arms and states with coldness that the boy wanted that. He ponders that stopping the fight would mean their defeat and would allow the rival merchants to cheat in the city. The finance master remains seated, observing the combat quite serenely without showing concern for the young man. The long-haired man reveals quite calmly to the judge that the boy is also indeed one of the disciples of his sect. He warns with total confidence that the duel will not end in a simple way and advises the official to just watch the fight. In the stone arena, the hero continues performing quick dodges to escape the continuous and furious attacks of his rival. The boy rests on his knees on the ground, panting and tired due to the great physical effort required to dodge the swords. The opponent approaches with an arrogant smile on his face and asks if running away is the only technique the boy knows how to use. The bully puts his heavy sword on his shoulders and mocks the hero, calling him a scared and weak little rat. The protagonist stands up calmly and asks, ironically, what on earth the adversary is talking about there in the arena. The hero says mockingly that he has been training for less than a year and that the rival should be ashamed for not landing a single blow. He irritates the bald man by saying that if someone like that is the leader of the sect, its level is certainly very low. And Side Mukwei, Young admits that he was in trouble since his adversary is truly very strong. He remembers that before he could only run away and that if he depended only on quick dodges, he would end up defeated. The protagonist opens a very focused and determined look because he knows that now things are quite different. The young bald master grinds his teeth in so much anger upon being provoked in a humiliating way by the boy. The bearded alley screams desperately, asking the young leader to calm down and control his temper. Without listening to the advice, the bully advances furiously with heavy steps toward the protagonist. The bald man delivers a deadly sword blow while the hero dodges the attack in the last second. The adversary sweats nervously upon realizing that the boy managed to escape his onslaught with ease. Hawaii, Young prepares a very potent punch and thinks that now he possesses a special secret skill. He activates his resistant body power that he bought for 2 coins to withstand the impact of the counterattack. The protagonist hits a devastating punch directly against the opponent, generating a huge shockwave. The bully's face distorts completely upon receiving the brutal impact of the punch from the Wudang boy. All the spectators in the temple courtyard remain in absolute silence and shocked by the quick outcome. The opponent falls unconscious on the stone floor, while his large sword falls right next to him. The hero realizes with satisfaction that he can defeat this type of opponent without suffering a single scratch. The boy looks mockingly at the other merchants and asks if they would like to continue the duel. The official judge raises Twi Young's hand and declares aloud his victory in that proxy dispute. The judge warns that the losers from Shanxi must accept the result and stop expelling the local sellers. A few days pass, and the mood in the commercial city of Yiqing finally returns to being calm and peaceful. The hero walks alongside his master, celebrating the absolute success they achieved in the salt trade. The elderly leader of the sect analyzes the financial reports and comments, astonished that is incredible. The elder is very surprised to see that the young men managed to save 300 silver coins. The protagonist knows that the Shanxi rivals were forced to sell salt for the lowest price due to pure pressure. That whole intelligent strategy ensured a giant discount on the final purchase of the entire salt stock. The elderly leader fulfills his promise and delivers the 15 silver coin commission to the young boy. Wei Young kisses the coin bag, very happy, while the sect leader comments about the surprise of the case. The elder praises the boy's talent for defeating a martial master, even having trained for such a short time. The elderly leader warns that he intends to grant a special and unprecedented privilege, leaving the finance master surprised. The elder declares solemnly that from that day on, the young hero is accepted as an internal disciple. The finance master reveals, shocked, that for 50 years no common disciple had received that honor. The elder reinforces that the boy dealt very well with the problem and proved to have a truly unique talent. He says that the boy can now be proud of being an official member of Wudang, but the boy becomes thoughtful. The hero asks if he can make a special request, and the sect leader responds in a very generous way. The boy places his palm on his chest with an extremely serious expression before speaking. The protagonist asks on his knees to be expelled from the sect without having his spiritual strength destroyed. A deep silence takes over the entire temple after the boy's totally absurd and unexpected request. The elderly sect leader widens his eyes and is totally paralyzed without being able to believe what he heard. The finance master lowers his head out of so much shame and starts to sweat nervously at the boy's attitude. The boy explains calmly that his only desire is to make money, leaving the leader even more confused. He cracks a huge smile and states, without any shame, that he wants to leave because he likes money very much. The leader puts his hand on his face, trying to keep his cool, and remembers that a Taoist should avoid the mundane world. The elder highlights that the young boy has already learned the sect's secret fast movement techniques. He explains that no sect expels someone who knows their secrets without destroying their strength or their feet. The elder taps his fingers on the table, thoughtful, and admits that he has never faced such a bizarre situation. The elder reflects in silence for a few moments with his hand on his face before making his final decision. The sect leader makes a gesture with his hand and proposes an alternative deal quite interesting for the hero. The wise elder raises his index finger, indicating that he found the ideal solution to resolve the impasse. The leader suggests that the protagonist remain in the organization only as a registered secular disciple. Mokwai. Young is quite confused with the term and wonders what it means to be a registered disciple. The elderly leader explains that internal disciples usually register their names in a traditional ancestral temple. He completes by saying that in practice, being a registered disciple possesses the same prestige as an internal member. The Wudang master reveals that the hero will do the registration but will continue acting as a common secular disciple. The leader warns that this decision is not unprecedented and that there are already precedents in the old history of the entire organization. In the past, when the demonic cult emerged, the temple used this system to recruit new warriors from outside. The book grumbles that this story is very old and wants to know what exactly changes for him in practice. The leader explains that he will be able to learn the secret techniques and that he will also have to help the temple when called. The elder fixes his gaze on the boy and takes a very dramatic pause before revealing the most important detail. He guarantees in a very direct way that the boy will not suffer any coercion or forced obligation from the sect. Upon hearing that, the protagonist widens his eyes and is completely paralyzed with so much surprise there. The boy starts to hatch ambitious plans in his mind, imagining the use of the Wudang flag for his business. He thinks cheerfully about how to use the name of the renowned sect to open shops and profit high throughout the region. The boy imagines people buying any silly merchandise just because of the sect's sacred symbol. The hero realizes he will be able to profit a fortune with the temple's name while maintaining his freedom as a civilian. Suddenly, his master in blue pokes him firmly, calling his attention back to reality. The boy tries to calm down and reflects that the ideal at the moment is just to ensure the learning of martial arts. He opens an extremely wicked smile upon realizing the huge advantage that this new position will bring him. The young hero celebrates a lot and warns the leader aloud that he accepts the proposal to become a disciple. The elder raises his hand asking for calm and remembers that this old system only worked in times of war. He explains that since it is a very delicate case, he will need to take that approval to the Council of Elders. The leader warns that the important meeting will not happen immediately and raises 3 fingers in an imposing way. He guarantees that he will give a 3-month grace period for the protagonist to prepare himself for real. The man in blue explains that the other counselors will certainly oppose it for thinking it is a silly privilege. The elder completes by saying that in those months the boy will have to give a strong enough reason for no one to complain. The protagonist starts to sweat nervously upon realizing that the task will not be easy at all to perform in the sect. The young man focuses his gaze and starts to evaluate his real options to convince all the leaders of the temple. He breaks the hall's silence and asks directly what will happen to him in case he ends up failing. The elderly leader responds coldly that if he fails, he will be obliged to become an official internal disciple. The boy's other alternative will be to accept having his spiritual strength destroyed before leaving that place. The strong sun shines over the temple's beautiful mountains, where daily training continues at full steam. A friendly instructor with long hair appears with a friendly smile to welcome the protagonist. He praises the victory at the commercial fair while the hero trains, carrying a huge rock on his back. The man says the boy has incredible talent, while the protagonist walks with difficulty through the courtyard. The boy vents mentally and is thankful for having hidden the secret about his decision to leave the temple. A loud crash echoes through the stone courtyard when the young man finally drops the heavy obstacle on the ground. Exhausted and panting, the hero warns that he managed to complete the 20 exhaustive repetitions of the physical training. The instructor praises the impressive adaptation capacity of the boy, who evolved very quickly in training. The master decides to start the training with wooden swords and asks the young man to clean the courtyard while he waits. The hero pushes the giant stone block and acknowledges that his resistance is due to the purchased skill. He celebrates the end of the resistance training and thinks about how to prove his value to the sect's elders. The hero knows he needs to show overwhelming martial talent to convince the council members. He reflects that his commercial and financial skills would be more than enough for the position. The big real problem at the moment is that he is only just starting to learn the basics of sword combat. The protagonist holds the sword's hilt firmly, remembering that Wudong, after all, is a sect of swordsmen. The boy is quite excited to finally start practicing the renowned techniques of the classic style. Suddenly, the hero takes a quick blow to the head, and the instructor complains that he is very distracted there. The long-haired master reveals that the first lesson of the day will be the legendary 3 quality method. The boy recognizes the cheap manual that is sold in any common market for very few copper coins. The instructor smirks and explains that the version taught in the temple possesses a very different secret. The hero listens attentively while the master points his index finger at him in the middle of the courtyard. The instructor warns with a smile that he will not explain the difference and that the boy must discover it alone. The blue sky with white clouds and some birds flying shows that the day is running in a calm way. The young man complains about the confusing explanation, and the master laments that his understanding is so weak. The master asks if he knows the forms of the style, and the boy responds that he has only the theoretical basis. He visualizes the 3 main movements that consist of vertical, horizontal, and diagonal cuts. The instructor smiles, satisfied, upon seeing that the young boy knows the theory of all the blows very well. The man in blue orders the hero to repeat each of the 3 forms exactly 10,000 times in training. The boy shouts, outraged at the quantity, but the master guarantees that all members go through that. He tells the boy to forget speed and focus only on completing the great goal of repetitions. The instructor says goodbye and jumps far away with extreme speed, leaving the boy screaming in the courtyard. The protagonist complains a lot about the master's habit of saying what he wants and leaving without giving explanations. The boy scratches his head, confused, but decides to keep positive thinking to face the tough challenge. He holds the handle of the sword and plans to do the movements any which way to finish faster. The hero raises the wooden weapon with much determination and starts his exhaustive repetition training. The system shows that he completed only the first vertical cut of a gigantic total goal. The boy grinds his teeth from exhaustion upon realizing that almost 30,000 movements are still missing. He screams, desperate at the delay, while the sound echoes throughout the silent valley of that region. The little birds continue singing cheerfully on the branch of a tree, oblivious to the boy's suffering. Suddenly, the wooden sword falls to the ground, indicating that the young man completed the day's exhaustive task. The hero collapses on his back on the stone floor, panting, without being able to believe he completed the whole training. He smiles, tired, and concludes mentally that repetitive training also requires a certain level of talent. The boy realizes that performing so many blows in a row with the correct posture is indeed a very arduous task. He notes that his muscles started to lock up and that the final movements were already coming out half-crooked. The boy realizes that only with the 2 skills he possesses would he never be able to reach the ideal posture. Suddenly, a new notification from the system appears floating right beside him and calls his attention. The system offers a half-price discount on a new sword talent after he completes the challenge. He laments having to spend most of his hard-earned money from the Yiching mission on that new purchase. The young hero holds the sword again and realizes immediately a huge difference in his physical control. He executes the test blow and realizes how much the new sword skill improved his precision. The boy executes a quick and perfect movement, cutting the air and generating a strong gust of wind. He is very enthusiastic to note the huge practical difference at the time of delivering each of the attacks. He wonders if it is really worth it to do all the repetitions of that basic combat style. The long-haired black-haired master observes the scene from a distance with a quite serious and engrossed expression. He observes the protagonist training from the roof of one of the pavilions of that immense sect. The master laments that the young man goes back to playing and doing silly things as soon as he leaves the training courtyard. The instructor sighs, discouraged, with closed eyes, not knowing for sure what to do with the boy's stance. Suddenly, the master appears in the courtyard and orders, quite harshly, that the young man stop the training. He accuses the boy of fooling around, and the protagonist asks if he was spying. The man puts his hand on his face, worried, and warns that this way he will not be able to participate in the big tournament. The wooting boy turns his head, very curious upon hearing about such an evaluation tournament. The black-haired master opens a subtle smile from behind his fingers upon realizing the interest of the boy. He explains that the tournament serves as a friendly competition between the disciples of the third generation. The master leans his face in and asks if the competitive spirit of the boy finally started to wake up. The hero releases an expression of total disinterest, leaving the master with a quite frustrated face. He raises the wooden sword without any will and pretends to be very excited just to please. The boy asks if the elders will watch, and the master confirms that everyone will be present there. With a mischievous smile, the protagonist realizes that that is the golden chance to convince the entire council. He warns that he wants to participate in the evaluation tournament, but the master responds immediately that it is impossible. The young man shouts, indignant, asking if the refusal is because he is older than the other competitors. The master hits another blow to the boy's head and tells him to stop saying nonsense about his age. He warns that to enter the tournament, the young man needs first to master the sword method completely. The protagonist cleans the dust from his clothes and asks with curiosity when that tournament will happen. The instructor responds calmly that only 1 month is left and leaves the boy totally in panic. The young man realizes that training so many times in just 30 days is a true challenge of resistance. He wonders with suspicion if that basic style will be enough to show any real talent. The long-haired master observes him from the corner, thoughtful, imagining what the real limits of the boy are. He analyzes that the results of the boy vary a lot according to his mood, although he makes good cuts. He fears that leaving the boy alone will make him stray from the right path due to his inconstant focus. Suddenly, the master surprises him with a firm touch to start adjusting his body posture. He orders the young man to take the training seriously, while the boy complains about that sudden intervention. The instructor warns that just repeating the cut without posture is useless and starts correcting each movement. He guides the boy to spread his feet shoulder-width apart to improve balance and central strength. The master teaches the ideal way to hold the handle of the wooden sword with lightness and firmness in the fingers. Under the firm guidance of his mentor, the boy performs a perfect vertical cut toward the ground. The hero is quite impressed with the result of the blow and realizes the huge technical difference. Looks at the wooden weapon with astonishment upon Fawn, feeling that his movement was incredibly clean. The master asks what he thought of the experience and leaves the protagonist totally speechless there. The young man swallows hard upon realizing that the correct instruction made a scary difference in the training. The instructor asks with a smile if the boy still prefers to continue practicing the blows alone. Without arguments, the boy just grinds his teeth and grumbles quietly for having to accept his help. A whole month passes, and the deadline of the protagonist's exhaustive training finally reaches its end. He sits in the courtyard with a huge smile of relief for finally concluding his hard daily routine. The master approaches and comments quite casually that the boy seems to be in a great mood. The instructor asks if the warm-up is over, and the hero asks him to return in 1 whole hour. The master tells him to stop being lazy, and the boy obeys, grumbling while he picks up the weapon from the ground. The protagonist observes his mentor from afar and admits that deep down he is a quite incredible person. He reflects that the master spent the last few days by his side even though he is someone important and very busy. The boy wonders if the mentor does all that out of pure kindness, or if he possesses some other hidden motive. The instructor interrupts the hero's thoughts, questioning why he stopped moving the sword. He responds mockingly that he will continue the training even without receiving that annoying charge all the time. He positions himself in the courtyard and recognizes mentally that he, indeed, entered the path of the sword thanks to him. The young man squeezes his fingers on the wooden handle, preparing himself himself to deliver a new attack. The master focuses his attention with a very serious and engrossed look to analyze the boy's performance. Protagonist raises the weapon in the air with total confidence and warns that he will show the results of 1 month. He executes an impressive sequence of cuts in the courtyard, raising dust throughout the stone arena. The boy focuses his vision totally, showing that every movement now comes out with total precision and strength. He rotates his body perfectly, maintaining impeccable balance in each of the quick cuts. The boy finishes the series with an extremely firm posture, proving the absurd evolution of his training. The wind cut generated by the movement of the sword cuts the air with scary energy through the courtyard. Exhausted and panting after the demonstration, the young hero supports his knees and tries to recover his breath. The hero puts his wooden sword in his belt very calmly, finishing his presentation. The boy gives a subtle smile, quite satisfied with his own performance before his rigid master. The wooing master stares at him fixedly without showing any immediate reaction to the whole performance. The boy is embarrassed by that deep silence and asks directly what he is looking at so much there. He questions, very intrigued, if the master really has nothing more to comment about his training. The master sketches a gentle smile on his face while the boy begs for some compliment on his effort. The master admits, smiling, that it was just a joke and that his posture is now decent indeed. The instructor praises the evolution and comments that the boy really changed upon keeping the focus even when alone. The protagonist shifts his gaze in an embarrassed way and says that he only managed to obtain a new illumination. The protagonist asks if his performance is already enough to enter the tournament, and the master reflects. The mentor proposes performing a final test to put to the test the true skills acquired. He challenges the boy to block exactly 10 attacks in a row, using only his wooden sword. The master bends down and picks up a small tree branch that he found fallen on the temple's courtyard floor. He displays the small wooden branch with a huge smile and warns that he will use that as his weapon. The two take a distance from each other and stare fixedly in the middle of the hall's immense stone courtyard. The instructor asks quite pleasantly if the young man is already ready to start the test duel. In an instant, the look of the master changes completely, becoming extremely sharp and focused on the opponent. The hero advances with speed, delivering the first attack while the sound of the impact echoes in the location. The master praises the quick initiative of the boy to shorten the distance and force a direct combat there. He highlights, laughing, that this type of tactic only works when the strengths of both sides are equal. The master uses the small branch to deflect the attack and throws the protagonist backward with the impact. The boy lands with difficulty, but is forced to retreat quickly to escape the new onslaught. With an expression of pure stress and clenched teeth, the boy prepares for the next wave of blows. The hero defends himself in a rush, putting his wooden weapon in front to bar the quick advance. The instructor smirks very calmly and warns that that was only his second blow. The boy realizes, terrified, that the master is not taking it easy even using just a small stick. He blocks another onslaught while trying to discover what the real intention behind that challenge is. The boy realizes that the master is using the same 3 basic movements that he trained in the month. He understands that the mentor is evaluating if he really mastered the essence of each classic movement. The boy grinds his teeth with determination, knowing that he needs to block only the 10th and last attack. The master opens an extremely mischievous smile, indicating that he prepared something surprising for the end. He moves incredibly quickly, leaving multiple traces of his silhouette in the stone courtyard. The master executes an acrobatic movement and dodges the obvious block that the hero had prepared. He warns in a provocative way that the boy should never hesitate or lock his body on the last movement. The hero complains, very indignant, alleging that changing the posture at the moment of the final cut is an unfair cheat. The violent impact generates a huge shockwave of wind that agitates the trees around the pavilion. The small branch used by the master ends up breaking in half due to the colossal force generated in the duel. The instructor looks at his broken branch in his hands with an expression of sincere surprise on his face. He praises the impressive reaction of the boy, who managed to read the movement and block the attack in time. The boy gives a proud smile and grinds his teeth while asking mockingly what he thought of that. He celebrates, saying that he blocked the 10 attacks, but ends up taking another surprise blow from the instructor. The master asks ironically if the boy would manage to block that way if the weapon were made of metal. The boy grumbles, upset, thinking that if he had more time to train, the result would be different. The long-haired master closes his eyes and smiles quite pleasantly at the evolution of the boy. He reveals calmly that even if he passed the test, the hero could not enter the competition. The instructor throws away the broken piece of wood with a quick and casual movement of his free hand. He maintains a very calm countenance and focuses his attention on the reaction of deep confusion of his student. He explains that only the disciples of the main mountain have the permission to enter the dispute. Upon hearing that restriction, the protagonist widens his eyes and lets out a murmur of complete indignation. They arrive at the large tournament pavilion, where the red flags and lanterns are already decorated. The two sit side by side on the pavilion's wooden steps, while the boy makes a pouty face. The master asks if he is still pouting, and the boy complains a lot for having trained so much for nothing there. He explains that the prohibition applies only to lay members and that the rules are different for him. The instructor finds it amusing and complains that the boy is looking at him with anger because of a misunderstanding. The protagonist asks irritably the real reason the master brought him to the sect's big arena. The master warns seriously that the young man is underestimating the real level of the other warriors too much. The boy crosses his arms, offended, and asks if the master really thinks he would lose to the rookies. The master focuses his vision on the combat arena and indicates with a silent look that he should observe. He points to the center of the hall and orders the young man to watch that duel in progress with total attention. The instructor explains that that young man is the most promising among all the disciples of the third generation. He comments that the boy has an honest and direct style without leaving any gap open in his defense. The young fighter widens his eyes upon realizing that the onslaught of his opponent is too fast to follow. The opponent delivers a powerful cut and throws the boy backward with the huge force of the impact. The young man falls defeated on the platform, while the winner remains standing, holding his wooden sword. He taps the handle of the wooden weapon with total calm and confidence after winning the duel. The master reveals that that talented boy is Mayong, a direct disciple of the great sect leader. The tournament sign confirms the name of Mayong, as the great undisputed champion of that competition. The protagonist walks alongside his mentor through the courtyard, reflecting on the result of the tournament. The master asks what he thought of seeing the incredible skills of that prodigy with his own eyes. The boy admits with sincerity that the champion really possesses an impressive martial skill. He acknowledges that it would take many years of common training to manage to reach the sword level of that boy. The young man then starts to ponder about a very strange doubt that arises in his thoughts. He wonders why the elders insisted so much on holding him if they already count on such a genius in the sect. The instructor remains in silence, listening to the doubts of the young man with a thoughtful expression. The master warns that to convince the council, he will have to defeat someone at the same level as that champion. The boy thinks, determined, that he needs to win at any cost to prove his value within the deadline. He finds the conversation strange and asks how the mentor knows about the elder approval requirement. The long-haired master stops in the middle of the hallway and faces the young man with a quite calm countenance. He gives a side smile and asks in a mocking tone if the boy really thought he wouldn't know. The man says he learned from the sect leader about the boy's attempt to obtain the lay disciple status. The mentor admits that keeping a talent like him in the sect would indeed bring great benefits to Wudang. He looks in a penetrating way and says that deep down, the boy understands the hard reality of the situation. The man states with all certainty that at the level he is at, the hero will never defeat young Mayong. He remembers that despite having talent, the boy started training too late compared to the others. The master warns that the elders will never open an exception if he doesn't prove to be superior to the champion. The mentor asks what he will do if he fails and is forced to become an internal disciple of the mountain. The protagonist clenches his fist against his chest with a very serious and engrossed expression. He declares firmly that if it is necessary, he will destroy his own energy to manage to leave the sect. The master opens his mouth, shocked, upon hearing the totally extreme and unbelievable answer of the boy. The man makes a straight face in silence without being able to believe the limitless stubbornness of the young apprentice. The mentor lets out a long sigh of discouragement, trying to contain his patience before such madness. The master mocks, saying that the vocation to be a merchant can only be a call from the heavens, and the boy agrees. The man comments ironically that he also wouldn't like to see the talent of the young man thrown in the trash like that. The boy states that for a merchant, money is life, and the master asks what he means by that. The protagonist extends his open hand toward the mentor with a quite direct gesture. The hero asks back for the 100 coins that the master was keeping for him since the last bet. The boy repeats that money is sacred, and the man in blue questions where he wants to arrive with that conversation. The young man keeps his hand extended, saying calmly that his request has no secret at all. He reinforces, smiling, that he just wants to receive back the amount he had left guarded with the mentor. Later, the young man sits on the wooden bench, analyzing the shiny system scroll in his hands. He does the math and realizes that at the moment he possesses only 6 taels of silver left in his reserve. The boy remembers that he spent almost all the money received from the leader buying items and expensive skills. The hero reflects that he needs to use the remaining coins to buy a trump card capable of defeating Myong-il. He realizes, frustrated, that finding the ideal skill within the budget will be very complicated. The young man knows that cheap techniques won't work and that strong skills cost a true fortune. While the boy wonders how to get more coins, a heavy bag is thrown in his direction. The protagonist gets a scare upon holding a bag of coins falling by surprise into his hands. The mentor warns from afar that that bag contains the copper coins that the boy had asked for before. The young man opens the bag full of coins and asks ironically, since when guarded money earns interest. The young man asks why the mentor is giving him that money, and the master responds calmly. The long-haired master looks thoughtfully at the sky upon reflecting on the fate of his disciple. He states that if things continue this way, the boy will end up having his energy destroyed in the sect. The master ponders that his own insistence on bringing him to Wudang will end up harming the young man. He asks for the boy to face those extra coins as a sincere compensation for all that risk. The master reveals that that bag should contain an amount of approximately 100 taels of pure silver. He suggests with a friendly smile that the boy use the amount as initial capital for his business. The boy holds a silver bar and asks ironically if a Taoist should keep so much money. The master laughs from the corner and responds calmly that those savings are everything he accumulated. He explains that people helped by him in the past used to send gifts and amounts in coins. The mentor laughs, saying that keeping that whole secret amount had become just a hindrance. The protagonist pulls the bag strings firmly to close his precious money quickly. The boy warns, smiling, that he understands the message, but that he will never return money already received. The master turns around with a fun smile and asks how he is feeling after the gift. The boy runs off, excited, and confirms that now he recovered all his energy and willingness to fight. With a triumphant smile on his face, the protagonist guarantees that now he feels completely invincible. A few days later, sounds of blows with wooden swords start to echo through the training courtyard. 2 wooden blades clash with violence, generating a big impact and cracks through the air. The 2 fighters slide their feet on the floor stones, maintaining an intense exchange of attacks. Quick and precise cuts hit the wooden sword successive times at high speed. Myong moves with agility in the courtyard, demonstrating the whole technique of his refined style. Suddenly, slow and ironic applause interrupts the intense training of the disciples in the courtyard. The young prodigy stops his training right at that hour and turns intrigued to see who is clapping. He looks to the side with a quite serious expression, trying to understand the attitude of that stranger. The protagonist appears clapping in the middle of the arena, calling the attention of all the present disciples. The boy approaches, saying in a provocative tone that from up close the champion's techniques seem even better. Yahello stares at him with disdain and asks if he is just a simple lay disciple of the sect. The boy explains his strange condition in the temple and warns that he came there to perform a training duel. Yahello turns his back without any interest and tells the newcomer to get out so he can continue training. The hero just opens a mocking smile without being shaken at all by the rival's cold response. The young man shouts that he will consider that refusal as a shameful withdrawal, leaving the rival surprised. He laughs and warns shamelessly that he really needs the approval of the elders at that moment. Irritated by the provocation, Yahello squeezes the sword handle firmly until veins pop in his hand. The protagonist leans in with a mischievous smile from behind the boy, increasing the tension even more. Taken by anger, Yahello turns with a dark look and asks for the instructor to act as judge. The young prodigy closes his eyes for a second, trying to control the hatred that boils in his chest. The instructor accepts the request with a smile, finding the whole rivalry between the two amusing. Yahello lets out a deep breath through his nose, preparing his posture for the duel that is to come. He faces the opponent with coldness and promises to make him regret bitterly those provocations. The protagonist maintains a sarcastic smile on his face and challenges him to come with everything he has. The two combatants position themselves in the center of the arena under the supervision of the instructor who acts as judge. The judge positions himself between them and asks aloud if the two fighters are properly ready. The hero wields his wooden sword with calm and confirms that he is ready for combat. Yahello assumes his classic fighting posture and responds firmly that he is already prepared. The instructor closes his eyes for an instant before giving the final order to start the dispute. The referee shouts the start order, and the two young men advance against each other at high speed. The wooden swords of the opponents clash in the first blow, releasing a big flash of energy. The colossal impact of the clash between the blades creates a wind wave that throws both backward. Yahello supports his hand on the ground and slides on the stones, cushioning the impact of that counter-attack. He firms his feet with precision on the stone ground, preparing his next advance against the adversary. Yahello holds the sword with both hands and delivers another fast attack against the protagonist. The hero blocks the powerful cut with his wooden sword, supporting the weight of the blow. He feels his arms numb with the adversary's strength and realizes that that simple style is overwhelming. The boy notes that he is losing the speed advantage and that he will end up defeated if he continues only on the defense. He opens a confident smile upon remembering that he will only lose if he decides to continue fighting that way. He pretends to be desperate in combat to make the prodigy believe that that is already his maximum limit. The hero starts to plan in secret the activation of a new surprising skill in his system. The boy opens the luminous scroll to take the opponent totally unprepared in the middle of the duel. He touches the fast movement registration, knowing that he will have only one chance to turn the fight in his favor. The bag of coins at his waist starts to glow intensely as it pays for the cost of the new technique. The protagonist decides to use all his accumulated power and advances with everything on top of the adversary. With a huge smile on his face, the boy starts the attack, confident that his surprise will work out. Yahello realizes the sudden change of the rival's posture and prepares himself quickly for the clash. A magic message appears in the air, warning that he can now equip an additional combat talent. The boy is left completely stunned and confused upon seeing the unexpected notification appear in front of him. Two young disciples look down at the training grounds from high up on a wooden balcony. The younger one wonders what Yahello was thinking when he agreed to a duel with such a huge skill gap. The other explains that Yahello must have been deeply frustrated by the rumors that Young wanted to challenge him. He mentions that being compared to an outer disciple could not have been good for his reputation. As he watches the match, he starts to suspect there might be another motive behind this showdown. Yahello looks up to the master, so seeing all the master's attention shift to Young must have rattled him. Back in the fight, the system alerts Young that he has exceeded his equipable talent capacity. Young rolls across the ground to swiftly dodge another strike from his opponent. Myung sees the clumsy move and assumes his outer. Court rival lacks basic technique. Why? Young jokes that it was just a stylish tactical roll to get out of harm's way. With that, he shifts his focus to the bamboo scroll he just acquired through the system. The boy panics when he realizes he needs to spend more coins to unlock another talent slot. Myung charges forward aggressively, giving his opponent zero room to breathe. Young slides back at the last second to slip past Myung, hands blazing rush. He laments that he cannot just stack basic martial arts to boost his stats efficiently. Realizing he is out of options, he decides it is time to switch out his equipped skills. He unequips his old agility technique and equips the new movement skill he just bought. Instantly, his body feels remarkably lighter, proving the investment was well worth it. Myung gets ready to strike again with pinpoint precision and full speed. Young knows he will not have time to get used to the new skill, since his rival will not let up. Because of that, the MC decides to go full throttle right from the start of the dash. However, he overdoes the speed, trips hard, and faceplants straight onto the arena floor. Myung stops dead in his tracks, staring at the scene in utter disbelief. The opponent looks down at the fallen MC with a completely bewildered look on his face. Young stays sprawled out on the ground while everyone around tries to process what just happened. Up on the balcony, the younger disciple figures the outer disciple just made a rookie mistake out of nervousness. The boy then asks for the take of his companion, who continues watching the match in total silence. But the older spectator is actually stunned by the absurd burst of speed he just witnessed. He admits the wipeout looked silly, but the raw speed was almost too fast for his eyes to track. Young gets up, wipes his nose, and wonders what went wrong with his body control. He regains his footing and locks a sharp gaze back onto the waiting opponent. The two clash fiercely once more, locking their wooden training swords in the center of the arena. Myung pushes hard against the blade, accusing Young of hiding his true strength. Young fires the question right back, surprised that his rival managed to keep up with his top speed. They break apart quickly after the heavy impact of their wooden practice weapons. Myung tenses up, wondering if the outer disciple had been testing him this whole time. He realizes that ridiculous agility explains all the swagger his opponent showed earlier. Even so, he takes a deep breath, confident he can handle that pace. That is the rival's absolute limit. He convinces himself he was merely caught off guard before and can easily counterattack now. The young man reminds himself that he is an official disciple of the main Wudang Mountain and vastly superior. Driven by pride, he surges forward in a high-speed frontal assault, launching a direct thrust. But his eyes go wide in shock as he notices something completely off about his rival's footwork. He flashes back to when the master warmly checked in on his daily training progress. Refusing to accept losing to a mere outer disciple, he pours all his determination into the strike. The warrior swings his wooden sword with full force toward his fast-moving opponent. Yet a cold sweat runs down his spine as he realizes he completely whiffed due to the dodge. Panic sets in as he sees Young's speed ramp up even further beyond belief. Myung boils with rage upon realizing the kid had been playing him throughout the entire duel. He wonders in disbelief if that earlier agility really was not the rival's top gear. Suddenly, Myung coughs up spit as a clean hit lands right through his guard. The two disciples on the balcony watch the climax of the bout, completely stunned and speechless. Myung lies flat in the middle of the courtyard, knocked out cold next to his wooden practice sword. The referee calls the match and officially declares the outer disciple Young as the winner. Upon coming to, the defeated fighter points straight at his rival and calls him a liar. He tears up in frustration, clutching his head and whining that his opponent cheated by hiding his top speed. Young just sighs, thinking to himself that people naturally keep a few cards close to their chest. The next day, the towering stronghold of the Wudang sect rises, grandly beneath the sacred mountain mist. The master stares down Young sternly and asks what on earth he was pulling out on the training grounds. The mentor questions how the boy managed to take down Myung, only to receive a cheeky cheeky response. Hawaii, young whistles, playing innocent while the master glares at him with pure suspicion. The sect leader rubs his temples and decides to drop it, since a win is still a win. He looks intently at the disciple and asks what his plans for the future are moving forward. The mentor points out that word of the victory has spread, so the elders will soon have to acknowledge his martial talent. However, he warns that his status is not set in stone yet, suggesting he put on a full show at the Elders' Council. Young grins with confidence, stating he plans to prove his business acumen on top of his combat prowess. The master laughs and warns him that proving commercial talent takes way longer than showing off fighting skills. The young man casually replies that he just needs to borrow the prestigious name of the Wudang sect for a little while. With a sly grin, the MC claps his hands together, hyped up about his brand new master plan. He then pitches a direct proposal to the master, suggesting they launch a lucrative joint venture together. The scene shifts to the grand halls of the sect, where the young man's bold proposal is put up for debate. The pavilion lord listens with intrigue, wondering if acting as a middleman could truly bring in any real profit. Young clenches his fist with conviction, guaranteeing their business model will be an absolute home run. The leader is puzzled, unable to see why anyone would pay the sect to broker deals instead of trading directly. The MC smiles and explains that he only thinks that way because he does not know the struggles of small local merchants. He points out that for ordinary folks without martial arts training, surviving in the Central Plains is a total nightmare. The young man notes that merchants live in constant anxiety over the fear of having all their goods stolen. That is where the Wudang sect steps in, offering their brand and protection to guarantee peace of mind for everyone. As a respected righteous sect, they could charge a modest fee to escort and protect local merchandise. This gives merchants complete security, while the sect simply needs to store and deliver the goods intact. On top of all that, they take home a solid cut of extra profit through sales commissions at the end of the line. He concludes that it is a win-win for everyone, and the pavilion master admits the plan sounds pretty solid. Despite finding the pitch appealing, the man still hesitates about how smooth the actual execution will be. A few days pass, and a massive banner announcing the official Wudang brokerage goes up in the city. A huge crowd of curious merchants packs the area right in front of the sect's new commercial post. The merchants chat happily in the courtyard, while the pavilion master and an elder watch the whole scene from afar. The elder remarks with surprise that business is booming way beyond what any of them had originally anticipated. He highlights that it has only been 10 days since the opening and asks if they have managed to turn any profit yet. The pavilion master smiles, grabbing his abacus to quickly tally up the coins brought in through the previous day. He cheerfully reveals that their accumulated profit over this short run is already nearing 200 silver coins. The elder is floored as he does the mental math and realizes the astronomical fortune that represents in salt value. The Grand Wudang Agency stays bustling under the clear blue sky as word of their commercial success spreads. The white-haired elder asks if this brilliant business concept truly came entirely from Manhwa. Young, the pavilion master confirms with a smile, praising the kid's unbelievable talent for making money. The elder then suggests they head into the meeting hall, since the VIP guests are already waiting. His companion agrees, and the two make their way toward the elegant pavilion built over the calm waters. Inside, the representative of the local merchants bows deeply to the leader, with tears of gratitude in his eyes. He states that thanks to Wudang, merchants can finally conduct their business with total peace of mind. The merchant praises the initiative, declaring that this was a feat only their prestigious sect could pull off. He hopes the business will thrive for years to come, and the leader promises to do everything to keep the partnership rock solid. To seal the alliance, the merchant mentions he brought along a small token of gratitude and reaches into his robes. The sect leader's eyes go wide in pure astonishment at the glowing treasure resting inside the small chest. It is the legendary divine pill of the Heavenly King, casting a deep blue glow before everyone in the room. Many years ago, there existed the reclusive Heavenly King sect, nestled by the shores of the isolated Lake Qinghai. 10 years ago, that sect disbanded, and countless martial artists tried to loot the precious elixir from their temple. It was rumored that the medicine held miraculous properties, but its whereabouts remained a complete mystery until now. The merchant asks the leader for understanding, explaining he cannot reveal how he acquired such a rare artifact. He emphasizes that if this elixir helps forge a new pillar for the Central Plains, everyone stands to gain. The man warmly asks the leader to accept the gift in good faith, without any pressure or hesitation. The leader looks at the chest, thinking he would normally decline, but he must consider the future of his young disciples. With that in mind, he accepts the sincere offering, leaving the merchant representative thrilled and deeply grateful. He reflects quietly, struck by the massive positive impact Young's venture has brought to the everyday people. The master confesses he is eager to see what the Council of Elders will decide regarding the young man. The big day of the Elders' Council finally arrives, bringing everyone together inside the sect's Grand Sound Pavilion. Young walks in, thinking to himself that he has been visiting this sacred hall a lot more often lately. The young man stands before a table packed with senior elders, a situation he never dreamed he would experience. He spots Elder Chiang, Yu sitting in on the session and wonders if the man is actually an official council member. The boy thinks that had he known earlier, he would have squeezed a much bigger financial payout out of him. He questions whether charging a mere 2 silver coins for that whole extortion stunt was way too cheap. The Grand Leader clears his throat, drawing everyone's attention to officially kick off the decisive meeting. He announces the start of the hearing to determine whether Young should be accepted as an official outer disciple. The master calls for their input, and an elder instantly leaps to his feet, slamming the table in protest. He acknowledges the kid's raw talent, but argues that handing out the title so easily would set a terrible precedent. The other elders debate, pointing out that this was an exceptional rule originally used back during the demonic sect crisis. The opposer warns that this could make inner disciples crave outside freedom and covet the sect's secret arts. Another master suggests simply letting him go, but the others argue that his talent is far too valuable to lose. The leader steps in, stating the sect should not be tied down by a few individuals, though he admits the boy is extraordinary. Seeing the heated debate spiral, one of the opposers shouts out, demanding an end to the pointless back and forth. The supreme leader agrees and suggests they move straight to the final council vote right here and now. Before doing so, he decides to give the young man one final chance to speak and win over the room. He turns directly to the MC, asking if he has anything to say in his own defense. Young smirks, gladly taking the floor since he was already sick of just standing there listening in silence. He steps forward, reminding himself that in his past life he sold thousands of products, so pitching is second nature to him. He prepares to speak with complete confidence before a table full of curious eyes. The young man introduces himself, wondering how he could possibly fail at selling the ultimate product himself. Everyone at the grand table falls quiet to hear what the young outer disciple has to say. He opens his pitch by stating that everyone present must be fully aware of his recent achievements. The boy recalls proving his martial prowess by taking down the sect's top prodigy of the new generation. He adds that he proved his business vision by building an enterprise that brings in 600 silver coins every single month. The elders start whispering in shock once they realize the true scale of the new business's monthly revenue. However, the boy points out that this massive financial success was only possible because of his current flexible standing. He explains that becoming an inner disciple would bar him from business, completely wasting his commercial talents. On the flip side, being cast out of Wudang would mean having his danshin destroyed, wiping out his martial arts forever. He reveals that he aims to excel in both worlds, and the only way to do that is with the freedom of an outer disciple. That way, he can learn Wudang's martial arts while simultaneously operating as an official outer disciple. He locks eyes with the room and guarantees the potential they have witnessed so far is merely the beginning. Young promises to climb even higher, becoming the first in history to master both martial might and commerce. The young man asks them to consider how much glory his talents will bring to Wudang and the regional economy as a whole. He offers a respectful bow and thanks the elders for hearing out his sincere address to the end. The silence breaks as the judges begin murmuring among themselves, thoroughly impressed by his sheer boldness. They passionately debate his points, admitting that Wuding has never seen anyone quite like him before. The Supreme Council leader cracks a faint smile, showing he thoroughly enjoyed the young man's presentation. He calls for quiet and announces the start of the official vote to decide Young's future in the sect. The Grand Master asks all elders in favor of the boy's petition to raise their right hand. The opposing elder slaps a hand to his forehead in frustration, realizing he has been utterly outvoted. Nearly every member at the table raises their hand, officially approving the boy's formal entry into the sect. Young breathes a sigh of relief and flashes a warm smile after enduring that high-stakes moment. The Supreme Master steps up to deliver the final unanimous ruling of the Grand Council. He proclaims out loud that the Wuding sect officially accepts Mook Young as its new outer disciple. Holding his wooden identification plaque, the young man smiles with emotion, finally feeling recognized by the sect. The MC walks out of the hall beaming with joy, while his master follows right behind him in quiet amusement. The mentor notes that he now belongs neither strictly to the main mountain nor purely to the secular world. He asks if the boy will feel lonely in such a unique position, but gets a light-hearted brush off in response. Young explains that he prefers the freedom to learn martial arts without being chained down by rigid dogma. Seeing that level of resolve, the master admits there is nothing left he could possibly say to change his mind. He reminds him that now that he is officially accepted, the boy must address him properly as master from here on out. The master also tells him that he needs to treat the direct disciples as his senior martial brothers. He introduces the familiar young peers Myong, Sung and Myong Jiang, who look over their new partner with curiosity. The tutor also introduces Myong Jin, who has the least seniority among them, but is still older than the MC. He then orders Young to greet them formally using their proper senior titles right now. Awkward and embarrassed, the boy scratches his head, struggling to force out the words. He hesitates for a few seconds before mumbling the greeting in almost inaudible whisper. The master cups his ear and shouts that he could not hear a thing, ordering him to speak up loud and clear. Young grits his teeth, annoyed at having to endure this humiliation in front of younger kids. Backed into a corner, he belts out a booming good morning to his new senior martial brothers of the sect. He asks if that was good enough, and the boy replies that his tone is finally acceptable. The young man fumes inside, thinking these kids have no clue about the true age of his reincarnated soul. He takes a deep breath to cool off, remembering that he knows exactly how to flip an annoying situation like this. In business, money talks, but in the martial world, raw strength is what truly establishes the pecking order. He realizes that to turn the tables, all he has to do is challenge and beat this kid in a straight-up match. With a mischievous grin, he decides to pitch a friendly sparring session to his new senior brother. Young turns to Myong, Sung with a challenging smirk, ready to lay down his bold invite. He suggests a quick spar to celebrate joining, fully confident he can take down their most experienced peer with ease. But the master swoops in out of nowhere and flicks the boy's forehead, reminding him he does not even know the basics yet. The tutor orders Myong, Jiang to teach the new member the foundational moves of their renowned Tai Chi style. The young disciple gets super excited, her eyes lighting up at the chance to act as the MC's instructor. The next morning, under the rising sun, the young merchant's special training officially gets underway. Young tries channeling his inner energy into his hands and begins running through the classic martial arts stances. However, his form is incredibly awkward, and he can barely hold his balance in the poses. He strains to shape the energy flow around him, but his posture remains completely out of alignment. The little instructor watches the disastrous display with wide-eyed shock and pure despair. Utterly drained, she flops onto the ground and whines that she tried her best, but the student is just impossible to teach. The MC pouts and tries to defend himself, arguing that he was also giving it his all during the lesson. He remembers the girl trying to adjust his arms and wonders why his body locks up so badly during training. The system warns him that Tai Chi requires specialized movements, disabling all forms of auto-assist. The other boys chat, noting it makes no sense for someone so skilled with a blade to be this hopeless at hand-to-hand forms. They wonder if he just does not want to learn from them, but the girl insists the guy is actually good-hearted. Right then, the MC awkwardly books it past them, trying to escape the embarrassment of the session. He makes up an excuse, saying he will go practice on his own, so he does not waste his teacher's valuable time. The youngsters watch him leave suspiciously, while the young man grumbles about how those kids view him in the sect. Out of nowhere, the master appears right behind him and says that this clown show has gone on long enough for today. The tutor sighs and explains that the young disciple usually takes quite a while to absorb and master new techniques. He announces he will oversee the boy personally, sending Aiwei, young into a panic at the thought of losing all his peace and quiet. The young man smugly reminds himself that he is not like the others and knows full well how to make bank on the mountain. He cuts off the tutor's plans, respectfully announcing that he has an important update to share first. Young reveals he wants to leave the main mountain for a bit, pointing out that he is an outer disciple after all. Faced with the boy's unexpected request, the master goes completely quiet for a moment to think it through. The kid tries to keep a straight face, but a cold sweat breaks out under his master's unreadable gaze. Unsettled by that piercing stare, the MC asks why he is looking at him like that. He argues that outer disciples have total freedom to travel if they have urgent business to handle. The master counters that he just joined, asking where on earth he plans to go when he should be focusing on his training. Why? Young reveals he wants to pay a visit to his father, which catches the master completely off guard. The young man explains he wants to deliver the great news in person, since sending a basic letter would feel disrespectful. The tutor lets out a heavy sigh as he weighs whether or not to grant this special permission. The master finally gives the green light for the trip but attaches a condition, which instantly annoys the young man. The mentor admits he worries the kid will slack off and drop his martial arts training if left completely on his own. He rules that one of the senior brothers must tag along as a chaperone or the whole trip is off. Left with no choice, the MC quickly agrees to the condition so he does not blow his chance. When asked about his departure date, he answers that he needs a few days to get everything sorted out properly. The master eyes him with suspicion, sensing the kid is cooking up another one of his financial schemes. Why? Young smirks, thinking there is no way he can visit his father completely flat broke. The scene moves outside the temple grounds, where other outer disciples are casually strolling around. The boy marches down the stone steps of the sect, on the lookout for two old acquaintances of his. Young Osu spots him from a distance and asks in surprise why they are hanging out outside the courtyard. Why? Young gives a friendly wave to the two peers, mentioning that it has been a while since they last caught up. Osu brings up the rumors about his promotion and jokingly asks if he is going to start ignoring the outer crowd now. The MC laughs it off, insisting he is the exact same guy, just learning some flashier moves. Young chimes in, saying everyone around was dying to get close to him because of that VIP treatment. Boy quips back that plenty of people approached him, but they all vanished into thin air the second he brought up alone. Osu bursts out laughing, agreeing that lending silver coins is a whole different ballgame from casual friendship. But suddenly, the boy freezes and his eyes widen as he catches on to the real motive behind this sudden chat. He asks if the kid came all the way out here to ask him for coins, and Young compliments his sharp intuition. With a shameless grin, the young man bluntly asks if the two of them could lend him a hefty sum. Osu sighs and asks how much cash he needs, to which the boy replies that the more, the merrier. The other companion cuts in, asking first if it is true that he became a direct disciple under the great master. The MC happily confirms it, mentioning that he just got back from a private meeting with the master himself. Upon hearing that long-awaited confirmation, Young flashes a subtle, highly ambitious smirk. The two friends exchange looks, knowing this is the ultimate opportunity to build elite connections. They realize the real reason they are here as outer disciples is to gain influence with high-ranking Wudang figures. Sensing a golden chance to get close to the Grand Master, the two heirs immediately start negotiating numbers. Osu sighs in resignation, knowing he will have to dip into his influential family's savings to close the deal. He agrees to chip in, but warns that since he is only an heir in name, he cannot put up a massive fortune right away. Young asks for the exact amount he can provide, and the young man offers 500 silver coins. The MC is stunned, knowing that sum could support an entire family for years, but plays it cool so he does not look inexperienced. Yang agrees that amount is modest and asks what the absolute upper limit his friend could offer would be. Right after, the wealthy heir casually offers to lend the MC 2,000 silver coins. Young is blown away, knowing he is the heir to the merchant king, but wonders if he can really move that much money around. The long-haired youth assures him that if he asked his father, he could secure even more, asking if he should go that route. However, with an ambitious look on his face, he immediately shoots down the idea of bringing his father into the deal. He explains that doing so would give the valuable Wuding connection to his dad, whereas he wants to lock it down for himself. The kid gives him a knowing look, asking if the MC fully understands his personal ambition. Young agrees, thinking that such extraordinary ambition at that age proves the apple does not far from the tree. Looking at the promissory notes, he concludes that despite being just a kid, his new partner is someone worthy of real respect. A few days pass, and the outer courtyard of Wudang sits peaceful right before the start of their big journey. Young clasps his hands toward his young companion, politely stating that he will be relying on his support during the trip. Young Myong stares back with an ultra-serious expression, totally locked in on his chaperone duties. He warns that he will not tolerate any slacking off, making the MC think the master picked the worst possible watchdog. Young pretends to agree and enthusiastically nudges the boy forward, saying they have a long road ahead to Wuhan City. Curious, the little one asks if the MC's father really lives in their final destination city. The young man dodges the question, saying not quite, but admits he has some very important business to handle there. He wraps up the topic, assuring his friend that everything will make sense the moment they set foot in the bustling city. They arrive at a town packed with people buying and selling goods across lively open-air markets. The boy's eyes go wide at the scale of the place, asking if they have already reached their final stop. Young explains that this is a Shanjiang city and starts counting his coins to rent a couple of fast horses. The little chaperone freezes at the word horses, picturing the beasts sprinting at breakneck speeds. He grabs the MC's arm and shouts bossily, declaring that idea completely out of the question. The younger one explains that riding horses would defeat the whole purpose of their daily physical conditioning. He argues that walking builds strong legs, leaving the MC frustrated at having his comfortable travel plans ruined. To avoid an argument, the young man plays along with the logic, though he secretly plans to ditch the rule at the first chance. He suggests they stop for a bite, pretending to accept the hike, while secretly scoping out a chance to rent the horses. The little watchdog looks confused, asking if the young man really wants to stop and eat right this second. They pull up in front of an ultra-luxurious multi-story restaurant that leaves the younger boy totally speechless. The young man promises the spot is famous and that his senior brother will definitely love the dishes served inside. But suddenly, a heavy hand reaches out and rudely shoves the MC right in the face. It belongs to a restaurant employee who blocks their way with an arrogant and intimidating posture. He clasps his hands and starts throwing out cheap excuses to keep the boys from entering the upscale eatery. The man warns that even the simplest dish is pricey, sarcastically asking if they even have the cash to pay for it. He keeps up the mockery outside, remarking that plenty of people walk in without a single penny in their pockets. The waiter adds that it would be humiliating for everyone involved if they ate and could not settle the final bill. He points toward cheap spots nearby, but why? Young completely loses his patience with the insolent and snobby attitude. The MC snaps back angrily, demanding to know if they look like beggars to be treated like dirt. Startled, the younger boy tries to calm him down, reminding him that a man of the Taoist temple should not use such harsh words. Young fires back that the waiter insulted them first by looking down on their Wudang sect robes. The little one gasps upon realizing the man actually dared to disrespect the sacred uniform of their very own order. The waiter quickly tries to backpedal, claiming the whole thing was just a huge misunderstanding on his part. He claims he was only referring to the usual budget of Taoists. But why? Young decides to teach him a hands-on lesson. The young man reaches into his coin pouch, rattling the coins inside with a loud metallic clink. Without a second thought, the youth flings a shiny coin straight at the obnoxious attendant's face. The worker snatches it out of the air in shock, grumbling in annoyance without realizing what was just thrown at him. His eyes nearly pop out of his head when he opens his palm and sees he is holding a genuine silver coin. The MC casually brushes it off as just a tip and demands the man learn who he is dealing with. He steps closer with a smug grin, telling the attendant to answer his question without delay. The waiter gulps hard, deeply regretting having misjudged the financial weight of this young customer. His whole attitude flips in an instant as he bows low, begging for forgiveness for failing to recognize such a distinguished hero. The worker extends an arm to clear the path, inviting both heroes inside under his personal escort. Why? Young winks at his little supervisor, smugly asking if he saw how to handle that kind of problem. The kid stares back in silence with a totally blank look, unable to wrap his head around that behavior. The boy concludes he will never truly understand how the minds of people outside their sacred temple work. The upscale dining staff begins rolling out massive platters loaded with the finest dishes on the menu. A variety of piping hot, mouth-watering plates are set down one by one across the polished wooden table. In the end, the two sit before an imperial banquet fit for kings, ready to enjoy their feast in style. The younger one frets that the meal is way too expensive, but Young assures him he secured plenty of funds from his buddies. Convinced by the answer, the little one accepts the treat and gets ready to try some of the soup. He lifts a spoon filled with steaming broth to his mouth, tasting the food with sky-high expectations. An explosion of incredible flavors hits him, and a brilliant golden aura seems to radiate from the young Taoist's body. In total bliss, he asks if this some secret elixir because of how revitalized his entire body feels. The MC gets a kick out of the reaction, smiling as he reveals that it is actually bird's nest soup. Blown away, the little one declares he wants to try every single dish laid out across the loaded table. Young grins, knowing that after this, the kid will never want to go back to plain temple food. Jaeyoung raves about the amazing flavors while the young man pours him a cup of hot tea to go with it. He promises to keep his companion eating like royalty for the entire duration of their journey. In return, he casually asks if the boy could keep this lavish feast a complete secret from the master. The MC shoots him a conspiratorial look, waiting for a nod of approval from his little chaperone. He reiterates that the master must never find out about these extravagant expenses along their route. Jiang puts on a mysterious grin, asking if this deal does not make the journey a win-win for both of them. Won over by the incredible food, the little one agrees to keep quiet, leaving the MC completely thrilled. Young walks with a spring in his step, knowing that without the master's strict eye, he can focus entirely on business. Suddenly, the waiter returns, mentioning that an important patron on the upper floor would like to invite them to her table. Young asks who this person is, and the employee points toward the distinguished guests seated on the second floor. Looking up, he spots an elegant young lady in fine attire and suspects she belongs to the powerful Juge clan. He reasons that this region falls under that clan's territory and figures the invite was probably sparked by simple curiosity. The young man thinks it would be incredible to establish strong business ties with such a powerful family. The youth informs the little one about the Juge clan's invite, and the child asks why wealthy folks would bother doing that. Why? Young admits he is not sure why, but guarantees they are bound to get even more high-end food up there. With sparkling eyes, the younger one wipes his mouth, hyped up by the promise of more gourmet delicacies. He hops up excitedly, deciding they should head straight up to the mysterious lady's table. The two start climbing the restaurant's wooden staircase toward the VIP section, reserved for the prominent guest. Why? Young scans the surroundings, intrigued by the commanding presence of that mysterious woman on the second floor. They reach the top and spot the young lady waiting for them, looking poised and utterly confident at her table. The young man is taken aback by her bold aura and tries to guess if she truly is part of the main Juge household. Wearing a veil over her face, the young woman politely greets them, praising the presence of Wuding sect heroes. The little boy introduces himself and then presents Wei, Young, as his junior martial brother in their training lineage. The woman finds it odd that the young man lacks a Taoist generational name, asks if he recently joined the order. Young clarifies that he is just an outer disciple, and she scoffs at the sight of an inner disciple sharing a table with an outer one. Myong Jiang proudly sticks up for his partner, stating that they both share the exact same master in the sect. The young woman smirks wryly behind her veil upon hearing the little companion's proud explanation. She removes her veil and introduces herself as Zhu Jian, leaving the MC completely frozen in place. The youth panics, recognizing her as the dreaded and ruthless merchant known as the Iron Mask. This woman runs the clan's external ventures and is famous for aggressively expanding operations with her vast wealth. Her brutal strategy involves dumping goods below cost to crush competitors before establishing a total market monopoly. Due to those cutthroat tactics and the mask she used to wear, she earned the terrifying moniker of Poisonous Heart. Why? Young never expected to run into her, but decides it is best to avoid picking a fight with someone so dangerous. He politely thanks her for the dinner invite, but the young woman coldly replies that there is no need to thank her. She admits she never would have called them over had she known a simple outer disciple was part of the Wooden group. The young man tries to smooth things over, but the woman shoots back that a bird and a fish live in entirely different worlds. Young tries to argue they can still be friends if they speak the same language, but grows irritated by her chilly attitude. He gets her disappointment, but finds it ridiculous that she is being so unnecessarily rude and condescending. Zhu Jiayang casually bites into some fruit, ignoring the young man while maintaining her haughty posture. However, the little Taoist boy boils with anger seeing his companion being disrespected like that right at the table. The little one jumps up, points a finger right at the young lady, and yells, asking who that old lady thinks she is to mock them. The merchant chokes on her food in utter shock at being called an old lady and getting backtalk from a little kid. The young woman quickly wipes her face, trying to recover her composure, and snaps that Wudong seems completely undisciplined. The little master fires back that she was the one who started picking on and humiliating his martial brother first. She claims she was merely stating facts, but the clever kid retorts that he was also just dropping pure truth. Completely backed into a corner by the boy's sharp tongue, the merchant covers her face in sheer irritation. Losing her cool, she demands that Young teach the kid some manners since he is the junior brother here. The MC plays dumb, claiming that in their sect, a junior disciplining a senior would be a massive offense. Thoroughly bested by the two, the woman buries her face and lets out a loud gasp of pure frustration. After catching her breath, she takes a deep breath and tries to regain control of the tense situation with a friendly demeanor. Forcing a sweet smile, she apologizes to the young man, claiming she temporarily lost her cool. She asks the little one to let go of the anger, and the boy accepts the apology while warning her to watch her mouth next time. The lady then asks for the MC's forgiveness, which he accepts suspiciously, wondering if she forgot to take her chill pill. She invites both heroes to sit back down, mentioning she had delicious dishes prepared especially for them. The woman offers the feast on the house and tells them to eat as much as they want while serving some roast chicken. The little Taoist's eyes light up with joy, and he instantly starts tearing into the food like he is starving. Why? Young watches the scene with suspicion, figuring this sudden turn in attitude must have a hidden catch. The merchant puts on a gentle smile, watching the little one gorge on the food without any rush. Taking advantage of the relaxed vibe, the young woman smoothly asks if she could clear up a quick question with them. She asks if they happen to know anything about the new commercial venture that the Wudang sect recently launched. The woman explains she heard rumors about a brokerage agency and asks if they know how the operation works. While the little one innocently sips his tea, the young man plays dumb to hide the fact that he is the mastermind behind it. Expressing regret over the lack of info, the merchant acts as if she is settling for the boy's clueless response. She then slides a letter across the table, asking the little one to hand the message straight to the head of the enterprise. The young lady backs up the request by claiming the Juge clan is very keen on locking in a partnership with the business. She argues that their sect lacks trade connections and that her family could easily fill in that massive blind spot. The woman smoothly insists that teaming up would bring incredible commercial perks to both parties. The little one keeps gnawing on his chicken bones, admits with a full mouth that he has no clue about business stuff. The young lady insists the task is super simple and that all they have to do is carry that sealed letter along. She points to the envelope on the table, emphasizing that the boy just needs to do this quick favor. Listening quietly, the little boy spits a bone onto his plate, signaling he is ready to give his answer. He wipes his mouth with a napkin and agrees to the favor, thinking it is just a harmless errand. The younger one asks if he really just has to deliver the paper, while Young watches closely, ready to step in. At that moment, the MC slams his cup down onto the table, instantly snapping everyone's attention toward him. He speaks up firmly, ordering his martial brother never to take that letter from the mysterious woman. The little one looks surprised, but the young lady glares, asking who he thinks he is to call the shots around here. Why? Young stands up tall and imposing, ready to put his true identity and authority on full display. The young master looks at him in surprise, caught off guard by the sudden shift in his companion's posture and intensity. He proudly announces himself as an official disciple of Wudang, locking eyes with his business rival with a razor-sharp glare. The young man states that as a sect member, he cannot just stand by and watch something cause serious damage to their temple. The woman tries to defend herself, arguing the partnership would bring huge profits to both sides and asking where the harm is. The MC fires right back, saying that if this were an honest partnership, he would have zero objections to the plan. He accuses the young woman of scheming to swipe all their trade secrets and client lists the moment she gets her foot in the door. He asks directly if his suspicions are wrong, leaving the merchant totally speechless and visibly rattled. The woman glares at him with pure, venomous hatred for having her sly schemes unmasked so quickly. She snatches the letter back and snaps that the accusation is totally baseless nonsense. The lady claims she just wanted to build goodwill with Wudang, but the boy holds his ground with a skeptical look. Narrowing her eyes in fury, she crushes the paper in her fist, stating she will not tolerate being insulted like this. Why? Young smirks with disdain, reminding her that this project was meticulously designed by him and will not be handed over easily. The youth lets out a sarcastic laugh, admitting he finds it disgusting to watch greedy rats try to swallow his hard work whole. The woman's bodyguard fumes over the direct insult, warning that those are serious allegations without a shred of proof. Faced with the provocation, the warrior rests his hand on the hilt of his blade, threatening to start a brawl right then and there. The little master flinches at the threat, grabbing his own weapon and shouting to ask if they really want to mess with Wudang. He takes a bold, ready stance, fully prepared to draw his sword and defend his group's honor. Seeing things spiral out of hand, the woman coldly orders her subordinate to sheath his blade. Why? Young leans in close to his little partner, whispering in his ear to suggest they make a quick exit. He gives a polite parting bow, stating that out of courtesy for the meal, he will pretend today's little incident never happened. The two march out toward the restaurant exit, leaving their irritated business rivals behind in the dust. Walking away, the young man reflects on how wild it is that she was already keeping tabs on his venture. He acknowledges he got lucky by knowing every single one of that woman's ruthless tricks and tactics in advance. He admits that without that knowledge, he might have bought into her smooth talk, thinking it was a massive golden opportunity. Back in the dining room, the merchant slams the table in a fit of rage over losing total control of her scheme. She fumes, wondering how that outer kid knew about her plan when they had not even made a move on the mountain yet. Rattled by the setback, she violently sweeps the tableware off the table, sending food crashing everywhere. The woman snaps toward her bodyguard, sharply asking if he is pretending not to hear her speak. The man bows low, begging for forgiveness and stating he would never ignore a dark lineage member, claiming he was just gathering his thoughts. Without an ounce of mercy, the young lady delivers a stinging slap across her subordinate's face, venting all her built-up rage. With a chilling, dark expression, she warns the bruised man never to tune out her orders ever again. Rubbing his reddened cheek, the young man lowers his head in humiliation, promising to stay far sharper moving forward. She swears payback against Wudang and orders an immediate, full background check on young Mukwang.